Hey guys, what is up? I hope you're all having a wonderful Mandela Effect evening tonight. We have a great show lined up for you tonight. You see my Indiana Jones hat. The only thing I'm missing is my whip. Instead, I have a land cable. Okay, so thankfully, I'm joined here by our guests, Candace and Josh. So you guys want to, Candace, you've been with us before. Josh, this is your first time with us. Do you want to go ahead and tell us about your research, some of your research that you're doing?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Thanks for having me.
Right.
And hello to everybody in the chat room. Basically, my journey with the Mandela Effect started last September. Well, I take that back, September 2016, around the 15th. And ironically, that seems to correspond with some events at CERN, as far as the accelerator increasing in its energy output. But later, I started to uncover some additional effects, and that's when it really started to sink in. At first, I thought it was curious that Berenstain Bears was now Berenstain Bears was now Berenstain Bears, and that seems to be an effect that a lot of people kind of kick their journey off with. But then, as I started to see geographical changes, that's when I really started to get, quote unquote, shook. And I decided to start really researching not only causation, what caused the phenomenon, but the effects. And the more I started researching the effects and logging them to a database that I created in Excel, it's an Excel-like program through Google Sheets, I started to see a pattern. And that's when I began my decoding efforts. And that's some of what we were going to talk about tonight.
Awesome, Josh. Thank you. Thank you for being able to come on today. And I do want to say that I actually heard this on the radio earlier today, and I'm not sure if any of you are aware of it, but today is actually Conspiracy Theory Thursday.
Oh wow!
So we may actually follow that tradition.
How appropriate.
I heard it on the radio. It was funny. Well, I was actually messaging you guys in chat earlier, and so I just thought I would mention it. So Candace, glad you can make it with us too. So what's been some of the stuff that you've been finding lately?
Oh, all kinds of things. So I've done a lot of research in a lot of different areas, looking for all different types of causation, from mind control to dimensions. And the way I operate is I have everything on the table, every theory, until proven or disproven. So I'm just looking at them all. So I know that Josh is into the dimensional theory, so I'm going to entertain that today and go into my own possible theories when looking at that.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I think Josh had a presentation, we were going to be talking about the origins of the Mandela Effect. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I thought it's good to go back to the beginning, even though a lot of people believe they know about the origins. There are some details which seem to be missing from a lot of the videos, YouTube videos, and blogs, and even Reddit posts that I've read. I think I'm pretty well researched on the origins of Fiona Broome and the coining of the Mandela Effect term. And so I find it really interesting that there's a lot of information there, I think, that people are unaware of, that leads me to question the official narrative. So a conspiracy within a conspiracy, perhaps. Oh, and just a note, I am a moderator of Parallel Realities Laws of Vibration on Facebook, and that's one of the groups that I post a lot of information that I discover, and so I'll be using a lot of those posts tonight as sort of talking points and a guide. A lot of the photos are already in there, so I'll try to incorporate some images as well.
Okay, awesome.
So you want me to go ahead and present?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh. I'll go ahead and light your on. Give you the floor. Okay, there you go. You got it.
All right. So you saw those pop-up windows there. So you're able to see this then, Fiona Broome. The images here on Google Images. I'm just confirming you can see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it. Candace, can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Cool.
So for anyone not already familiar with Fiona Broome, she is the person that coined the term Mandela effect. And this is Cynthia Sue Larson down here, who is actually a friend and also a member of the Parallel Realities group. I just want to mention her briefly because a lot of people confuse the two, and they're two separate people. Cynthia is actually a brilliant quantum physicist. She's actually a legitimate physicist who also is into metaphysics, and she studied with Fred Alan Wolf, who's a famous physicist who also delves into the consciousness and of mind and the physics of the mind. And so these are two separate people. And the interesting thing about Cynthia, though, Sue Larson, is that she actually started this sort of movement back in the early 90s called reality shifts. And she was noticing her own reality shifting, different elements of it. Maybe not on the level that we've seen with the Mandela effect, but certainly she was ahead of the curve there. But going back to Fiona Broome, now Fiona Broome, let me just pull up my little note sheet here. So Fiona Broome and a man named Shadow, you can all just kind of read along on my poster, who worked for Dragon Con. Shadow was like a bouncer, I guess, or kind of behind the scenes guy. And this Dragon Con or Dragon Convention was where they met. And Fiona had been talking to people behind the scenes at this convention that all seemed to be questioning the official narrative of Nelson Mandela's death. They thought that he died in prison, and in the, what was it, the 80s, I guess. And so she started to notice a trend where it seemed like reality might be a little malleable. And so basically, I'm questioning this whole narrative because I feel like there are elements of it that are kind of sketchy. For example, Fiona is not active in the Mandela Effect community. She, as far as I know and am aware, she has completely abandoned the Mandela Effect other than her website, which I'm not sure how active she even is on her website anymore. She is an active ghost paranormal phenomena investigator. And she has her own website where she takes clients and she writes books and she does interviews about that subject, but never about the Mandela effect. So it's really interesting to me that she has basically turned her back on the Mandela effect community right in its heyday, so to speak, because this started, you know, for her almost a decade ago. So when she coined the term. So here we are as of 2015, you can see in the Google, was it Insights or Google Trends? You can see when you search for Mandela effect that it spiked very clearly in 2015 searches for that term. And you would think, as the one who coined the term, that she would be jumping on that bandwagon and, you know, do some interviews. So I started wondering about it, and I look into the etymology of words. I look into numerology, the numerological value, the number value of words. And I started thinking about just the term Dragon Con. And we know that dragon is a figure often associated with the beast, with, you know, Satan. And you see that a lot in Hollywood, Hollywood, I call it. But so con in numerology is also associated with the Foxconn, like at the Apple factory. Are you familiar with that? Foxconn Apple factory in China?
Yes, yes. I remember the iPhone 4 when it was being manufactured by Foxconn.
Okay. The reason I bring up Foxconn is because in numerology, FOX is 666, and con I always think of as a con, as you're basically deceiving. So I thought it was really interesting that here you have a woman, Fiona Broome, and Broome, by the way, I don't know, for some reason in my mind it conjures up witches, you know. And then you have this man, mysterious man named Shadow, and they both meet at Dragon Con. And this is where they coined the term. But it gets even more interesting as we scroll down here on this post. You'll see that, let me just go to the photos. Okay. Now, this is where a lot of people remember, let me go forward here to Soul Invictus. There was a movie yeah, let me start here, actually. Knights of Malta. Now, a lot of people are unaware that Nelson Mandela was a member of the Knights of Malta, which is part of the Freemasons. It's a branch. And he had connections to royalty. And so this makes me question also if there's a deeper meaning behind why his name was chosen for this phenomenon. And you can see some images here of him with the white cross. But this movie Invictus, so a lot of people saw this movie with Matt Damon, Morgan Freeman playing Nelson Mandela. Invictus means unconquered or inconquerable. And there is a reference, I believe, in this name to Sol Invictus, which is the unconquered sun. And Sol Invictus is referenced here in this coin. It's an ancient Roman deity that is very reminiscent of the Statue of Liberty. And you'll see the similarities when you look at the statue. You can see the crown there and how masculine the face is. So it's almost an androgynous figure. So in my research, I've uncovered that Sol Invictus is actually another name for Lucifer, the unconquered sun. You can say S-U-N, sun, or S-O-N, sun. But so I think there's some really interesting connections there between Mandela and the Sol Invictus, and the fact that he chose a poem. Let me see if I can get back out of here so I can go back to the poem. There's a poem. The reason that movie was named Invictus, there is actually, let me see if I can find it here.
If I can say, Josh, while you're pulling that up, I want to share with the audience my revelation yesterday. I found out that Solomon, right, from the Bible, Sol, On are three names for the sun. You have Sol, I guess is Latin, right?
Exactly.
Which might be, I think it's like Indian, or, and then On is another name. So I find that really interesting. And then not to mention, the O is evenly distributed through all three. And O is the 15th letter of the alphabet. You have 1-5, which is 6, 1-5, which is 6, and 1-5 is 6. So it's really interesting.
Exactly. A lot of references to the sun. And that is a subject that's really important to this Mandela effect, because that connects to Saturn. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. But Saturn was actually, a lot of the elites believe Saturn was our first sun, and that our current sun is actually our second sun. The Saturn was a brown dwarf star that cast a purple haze over the Earth. And that's some ancient cosmology long before recorded history as we know it. Now, here I have highlighted on the screen here a little bit of just a snippet of the poem that I found interesting. So this is Invictus by William Ernest Henley. And it says, "Out of the night that covers me, black is the pit from pole to pole. And beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade." So I said, so basically a really happy poem about experiencing hell and rising up from the ashes. And it's the phoenix, which is a symbol used a lot in esoteric schools of knowledge. And they use that actually in governmental sigils. Like the eagle is actually a representation of the phoenix. And so you see the eagle in everything from the Nazi symbolism all the way through, America's governmental documents and symbols, and even England. So that's seen all over the world. They just substituted the eagle for the phoenix. So maybe already people are starting to see some connections and why I question the official narrative. But there are even more interesting nods to why Nelson Mandela was chosen in the CERN Happy video, which I don't know if a lot of people are familiar with that video, but CERN created a video. Maybe you can tell them a little bit about it. I know you know something about that, Brian.
Okay, which CERN video are you referring to?
Do you know the Happy video where they play the song from, I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name, but he's an artist, very well-known artist.
Yeah,
this Happy song, everybody's heard it. Clap along if you feel like. So they use that song in a video, And everybody needs to see that video that's Mandela affected, because there are a lot of clues in it about what is really going on. But there is one screenshot that I found really interesting, and it's not the one with Ellis, the physicist, holding up the Mandela sign, and Bond 1, which was Barry Nelson and Mandela. And I thought that was interesting, by the way. Barry, as in B-A-R-R-Y, could be Barry, as in B-U-R-Y. A lot of wordplay with these clues. Barry Nelson Mandela. And then, but in the screenshot that they have of some sort of game there that they have in front of some kind of a screen, there's two scorers. It's like two-player game. On the one side is the score 4664.
Josh,
and
do
on
you have
the other side is...
Do you have that picture? Do you have that picture?
I don't have it in this, but I can try to find it.
If you can, that way they can see it.
So
we have a lot of visual people.
Video, game score.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Let's see here.
We are happy it's...
Well, it's cut off, but this is the one, and on the left, maybe I can find a better one, but it says 4664, and then over here is 9. Now, if you reverse the 9 and add it in, you get 46664, which is a significant number not only because of the 666, but it's also significant because of Nelson Mandela's prison number. And this is another aspect of this whole sort of narrative that I question. And we'll show. That's not what I meant to do. Do 4. So we looked this up, and this is a reference to the year that Nelson went into prison, supposedly 1964, and then also the 466 was his prison number. So you put them together, you get 46664. But I don't think that's an accident. I think that was purposeful. And going back to the whole Knights of Malta connection, you can start to see how Nelson Mandela was involved in some things. So we see here that he held concerts for a number of years to raise funds for AIDS in Africa. That was the stories. I don't know, of course, where the funds actually went, but that's yeah. But this is kind of interesting. 46664, the number of my skin. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I've heard.
I guess that must have been printed on his skin. Go ahead.
Also, I've heard, Josh, again with these sixes, I know when you hold up the OK symbol with your hand, it makes a 666.
Exactly. Exactly. A lot of references to that. And someone brought up tonight in one of the posts that I just recently posted, in the comment section, they said, well, the carbon atom is 6, they had heard, and I haven't confirmed this, but it sounds right. 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so it's the number of carbon. And the carbon is significant because it's the color black. And we know about the black cube worship and how...
Holy crap, I never thought about that. Carbon is black. Oh, my God.
And there's a connection there to the design, the structure of this sort of matrix, illusory reality that we live in. And that brings up another point, but that we'll get to in a little while, about the honeycomb structure of this matrix and why the 6-sided hexagon keeps coming up over and over again. There's a hexagon on Saturn's north pole that is connected to all of this. But so that is a little bit about why I question the official narrative with Nelson Mandela. But also, one last point. I don't know if it's in these pictures here. I'll just very quickly, so I don't take up too much time. We want to get Candace in on the discussion here as well. But so this is a Medal of Valor in the U.S. And I just thought I'd point out it's an upside-down pentagram. And a lot of people may not be aware of this. Very occult symbology in this medal. But that is Sol Invictus. We were talking about the unconquered sun. This is not the Statue of Liberty. This is actually the Roman god Sol Invictus. And then above it, you see the phoenix symbology with the wings rising from the ashes, the trident. You see the lightning bolts, which are symbolic of Lucifer's fall from heaven, fall from grace. And then above that, most interestingly, if we include this star here, the large upside down pentagram with the stars up above, we get a hexagram. So once again, another reference to the hexagram. And then this is another close-up of the metal. And I think I've got all the images here. There is one more, this one. Now this one's interesting because this is a statue of Nelson Mandela. And I don't remember where this is at, but hopefully everybody can see up here. There is a tiny little rabbit in his ear. Now, to me, this is significant in the way I personally read this, and someone else may have a different interpretation. But I see that as the white rabbit, follow the white rabbit. And that's sort of the rabbit hole, Nelson Mandela's
That's
ear.
my thought.
That's what
cute,
you thought
isn't
was on? And I find that to be so fascinating because that's a reoccurring theme in all the movies out of Hollywood, the follow the white rabbit. The white rabbit's everywhere. And you know that the Chinese believe that there's a white rabbit in the moon. It's not a man in the moon for them. They believe in the white rabbit who mixes the elixir of the gods. That's basically elixir of immortality. And so I don't know if anybody's familiar with David Icke, but David Icke talks a lot about the Saturn moon matrix and how there's a connection between Saturn and the moon, and how the moon is not a natural construct, that it has either been altered or that it's actually some kind of constructed device, maybe part of a machine-like system, and that it amplifies. So it's interesting that they reference this rabbit. And that's all as far as the introduction to why I think there's more to the story about why Nelson Mandela was chosen to name this or coin this term for these sort of quantum pollution that is infecting our reality.
Yeah, because it's sort of trickling from one reality to the other and to the next and to the next.
Exactly.
And didn't you say, like, I think you mentioned to me that you can actually scientists were able to calculate that there's excess coming from another reality, right?
Right. When it comes to D-Wave quantum computers, and that's another topic that we need to get into in the next portion here, after we get Candace in here to kind of fill in with some of her wisdom. We need to cover the concept of D-Wave. A lot of people aren't familiar with it, or maybe just on the surface level. Maybe they've seen the Geordie Rose video where he talks about you know, it's like an altar to an alien god and all of that. So we'll get more in depth into that and how there's a surplus of energy being noted by their own scientists when they do these calculations into parallel realities. So I'll detail that a little bit more coming up soon. So Candace, regarding anything that I've covered as far as the introduction to Nelson Mandela, the questions I have about the official narrative, have you always followed the official narrative, or do you think there's more to this story about why it was named after Nelson Mandela?
Yeah, that's a good question. It comes down to causation, because there's so many theories, whether it's, you know, dimensions or mind control, and I've always said whatever clues we see could be there to mislead us down the garden path away from what it really is. So I've always looked at all the clues. I know they're there, but with skepticism.
Exactly.
As to why they're there. So if it was an AI causing it, it might make everything seem very religious. 666, you know, so that you don't look at it, you know, in the right way to be able to solve the problem.
It's multi-layered. It's like you're seeing the surface, and you're meant to stay on the surface and never dive deeper, kind of like an iceberg. You just see the cap.
Yeah, like I've read some documents on psyops, and they say some of them is like the whole ascension theory, that we're ascending, or that, you know, it's, I've posted it in my secret group, of course. You can go and have a look. But there's some interesting documents just on that. And that's why I look at all of these theories as to how it's happening, whether they're planted there to keep us away from the real truth.
Exactly.
So, you know, we know now in this reality, CERN's discovered, you know, invented the internet. www is like 666. Also with the changes, Berenstain is 666 in the Gematria. I've done some Gematria, you know, looking up some of that, and there's definitely clues in there. Whether it's planted or not, you know, it just seems intentional to me.
The Gematria calculator, by the way, I think that'd be interesting to show the audience later. Maybe you can present.
Yeah, I've got screenshots in front of me that I could
Okay.
read to you, but it's not on my screen.
Let me. Do you want me to go ahead and back out of that and give you a spot there to chat about that a little bit now, or do you want to wait?
You could even go yourself to gematrix.org and punch it in if you like, just to see if your results are the same as what I've got.
Gematrix,
GematRix.org is where I go to punch Gematria.
More the matrix.
I think this is the guy I was listening to a video about. He has his own YouTube channel. Is that right? Oh no, this is a different site. No, there's another guy who has a different website that he's created and built the coding in for the calculator.
So what I just to say, what I found was when I was punching in the different words, if I went to what the things have changed to, I couldn't really see a connection there so much. It was looking up the old words, what it used to be, that people that are Mandela affected would be able to identify. That if you punch that in, then you could see potential connections.
Okay, so Berenstain is an example, or Berenstain.
So like say Flintstones, for example, without the T.
With an S, Flintstones, right? Okay.
Yeah.
And then just calculate.
So at the top for me, I got right away there, 2012 predictions. That's just what came out to me. You know how people say, oh, we could have died in 2012.
Is that clearly visible there for everybody?
Yeah, you zoomed. So just if you zoomed out, we'd see the results. But at the moment, I'm just seeing the top of it.
So which number do you typically use if there's several? I mean, which one do you normally use for? Oh, I see. Look, you guys see that? I see the number 1268 coming up a lot. You see that?
Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure. I mean, I think this is sort of maybe the top results for the top searches that come back in this list. And so, you know, right away, I'm just looking to see if there's anything that I see that seems like a connection. And to me, it was just seeing the 2012 predictions.
Oh, I see what you mean. So you're looking at
so I'm looking at the equivalent Gematria number of other words, and that's the link, like a code.
Gotcha.
So the words, what they used to be, or the changes, what they used to be, you punch that in and you might see a link, like the equivalent Gematria number to something else that might be the clue.
And also, it's important to remember that numerology, Gematria is basically numerology. It's just the Jewish mystical form of numerology. And so there are values for every number, and every number has a message. And so you can't just look at the numbers themselves arbitrarily, you know, on the surface level. So you have to kind of go deeper and start to understand the what they total, you know, and also the individual numbers, what they mean. So
I'll give you another one, and you'll like this result. Hi-ho silver. You know how it's hi-yo? I mean, I don't know if it's still hi-yo unless it's flipped, but hi-ho was what it used to be when everybody was saying it was hi-yo.
You want to check that one?
I've looked it up for a while.
You go by the English?
When I went down that list, if you scroll, you'll see Large Hadron Collider disaster.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my gosh.
So these are searches that have number values
people have made, and it's that same, that's right, the same exact number value.
Evil billionaire.
Oh, my God.
That's fun.
It's the same number value.
Child molesters bullhorn.
So of course there's going to be a lot in there. I just thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting.
Wait a second.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's AI works with synchronicities, maybe? I mean, it's a
I'm
possibility.
not sure if it's like an Easter egg for us to find. So another one I typed in was trespassers.
I like the invisible one. It's kind of ominous.
Yeah, I mean, you can look at it and
Invisible.
you can
That actually
you
ties
can
in with
decide
another
that you
topic.
could decide it's linked to something else that I didn't see. I mean, I'm just letting people know what I was looking up and what I was doing, so everyone can go out there and do it, and you can let me know what you find.
Yeah, the invisible one is just an interesting reference only because I keep quoting the Bible verse change where it used to be the lion lays down with the lamb is now the wolf dwells with the sheep. And a lot of people say the lion lays down with the sheep, but or I mean the wolf lays down with the sheep, but that's a misquote. It's actually quite significant change because to lay down with something could indicate a temporary situation, whereas to dwell can mean permanent. So
Right.
The wolf dwells with the sheep makes me think that the only way a wolf could dwell with a sheep is if the wolf was invisible. So the invisible one. But I'm sorry, go ahead with your other.
I didn't really look up the dwell and lay down, but you could to what you thought it used to be. I did look up lion because I thought lion was replaced by wolf. And then the search result I got was for lion was black hole. This is what I noticed in that list.
Huh.
See, now you've got it. Now you're going to look. You're going to try to make.
That's very interesting. I have not seen this calculator before and how it has a built-in program to make suggestions on other searches that break down
other
to
searches that are the same value. That's right.
Value.
I like that one. How will humans? What does it say? How will humans respond to aliens? I like that.
Yeah.
When I put in trespassers, one of the equivalent Gematria things that was spat back was Gematria is the proof, which I thought
so
was
it's
trespassers.
You're talking about the passage? Oh, just
there's the Lord's Prayer and.
So I don't know if I spelled that right. Passers or just one S?
Trespassers.
Is it just one S on trust?
With an S. Yes.
Like that?
Yes.
Masonry. That's interesting.
And also Gematria is the proof is what stuck out to me. Like maybe I'm not on the right track looking this stuff up.
It's interesting.
Hey Josh, can you do this one for me? The one I'm sending you in the chat. See what comes up. When I just sent you in the private chat.
Okay, let me look.
And do the one in.
I don't see it there. Just go ahead and tell me what you want me to look up something on the calculator.
Yeah, because this was brought up to me earlier, and his number is 603 That one.
6 spelled out.
You have to do it word 6 and then 100 6.
And his number is 600 and
3 score. No, not and. 600 3 score and 6. 3 score is one word. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this comes up to be 1268. Wait, did you type in N60 N6? 600 3 score and 6.
His number is 600 3 score and 6.
Okay, so 2218 comes up. Try, and his number is 600.
Well, remember, there are different calculators. There's Jewish Gematria, English Gematria.
That's right.
So
so for me, obviously, I must have been looking at the Jewish one.
But look what came up first.
New World Order, what?
Oh, wow.
And look, every slave.
Wow.
Okay, now I'm blushing. Go back up. Crazy.
Wow.
Go back up. Do the numerical form instead of the worded form of the number.
Just
600. The number 666.
Okay. Well.
Oh yeah, do 666 and hopefully Berenstain will pop up because that's what
666. Or do you want me to do 666?
and his number is 666.
Oh, okay, that's different.
And his number, it'll probably be.
Do the 666, the actual numbers. Yeah, try that.
Okay.
So what happens? Dragonfly.
Alien DNA. That's interesting.
Yep. Oh wow. All right.
And another one that I looked up was Kamantu, because you know how in the Bible they said a lot of it was, you know, Kamantu was kind of a. And
Wild snakes. Also, just sorry.
And I noticed that was equivalent to the hidden Gematria code.
Can I say something? Can I say something, you guys?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so White Rabbit says I have some interesting videos on my playlist about Gematria. So guys, check out White Rabbit's channel. He'll send a link, or she will.
Yeah. Speaking of White
okay.
Rabbit.
Also, real quick, Ghost Riders Paranormal says everyone. I don't know if it means anything, but when he looked up the lion lays with the lame, spiritual warfare and deliverance. That sounds crazy.
Oh, I
wow.
didn't see that.
I'm trying to remember which one it was, but one of them spat out Stephen Hawking. It could have been wineskins. I was looking for that screenshot, but I thought that was interesting.
Oh, does anyone like anagrams here?
Oh yeah, that's part of all of this. So,
Here's an anagram for you. Look up Seinfeld and what anagrams you get out of that.
this is interesting. When you look up wineskins, it comes up with Morgellons symptoms.
Revealed. Oh, Morgellons.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Secrets revealed.
Since we think that Morgellons could be, you know,
interplanetary alignment. That's ominous. Elder abuse is caused of.
Oh no, it wasn't that one. It was wild ox, because they said wild ox in the Bible. They thought was changed from that to unicorn.
Searching for these things.
So Lord wild ox is Stephen Hawking is wild ox. That's what it was.
Wild ox.
Yeah.
2 words, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Wild ox. Oh, wow.
Stephen Hawking, I see.
That's right.
You know, a lot of people think Stephen Hawking, if he's even the real Stephen Hawking, either way, is a puppet of the New World Order, and that he rolls out these fear-based diatribes to try to steer people away from wanting to interact with aliens, wanting to, you know, explore the universe, so to speak, and wanting to do other scientific experiments. But he's always on the very sort of bullish side, especially when it comes to global warming or global climate change. He is pretty active. He believes, did you see the latest article where it said that he thought we were going to destroy, or be destroyed rather, in 600 years?
Hasn't he also warned us about AI?
Yes. And so has Elon Musk, and I bring that up real quick just because we were talking about Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, and all the different names. You know, Saturn, the former brown dwarf star, this gaseous giant planet, used to be ignited, and some people believe that the elites want to ignite it again. But they call Saturn the god of 1,000 names, and so that Saturnian lore has infected every religion around the world under the guise of various names. So it's just sort of interesting that his name, Elon Musk, is a combination of 2 words, L and on. And, you know, you were talking about Solomon.
Yes.
So very similar. Elon Musk, L is the name for, EL is the name for Saturn, and on is the name for Saturn. It's the name for the sun, like the switch is on. And it comes from ancient sun worship, the god On.
And Musk is something generally like masculine, right?
Yeah. And Elon is the one that advised that creating AI is akin to summoning a demon, summoning the beast. So he doesn't have a lot of confidence that we will be able to control it. And so it's a scary proposition, but it all ties into the Mandela effect as well.
There's a lot of videos about AI and how it'll end us by 2050. I think somebody was saying in one of their YouTube videos.
Exactly.
And there's another one, how we're already at war with AI. And then I noticed these things like CERN deployed AI to try to protect itself from hackers. And then how do they know it's under control? How would you know if you deployed an AI that it didn't get away?
Exactly. You don't know. How do you quarantine an AI? It
didn't copy itself.
Yeah, it has to be on local servers only. You can never have artificial intelligence on the internet because you have no idea what it's going to do. I was just watching, it's ironic, but last night I was flipping through the channels and I saw Lawnmower Man. And I haven't watched that, since the 90s probably. But it was very prescient for our conversation today because it was all about this man who merges with machine, goes into a virtual world where he becomes an AI god, and then finds a back door to get out of his containment and goes out into the world. And, the assumption at the end of the movie is that he's going to do exactly what he said he was going to do, which is take over the world. Very similar to the movie Transcendence.
Yes.
I stopped presenting. Just to let you know, Brian, real quick, I stopped presenting for a moment so I can locate another post of mine so we can move on to another topic here momentarily. But I just want to make sure that I've got it pulled up and then I can go back into present.
Go back to something you mentioned earlier. You know how you mentioned looking up things in Google Trends? That was also something that I hadn't brought up for a long time that I was going to, something that I found out about. There's a video about a guy saying, yeah, check this out, what I found on Google Trends, and he was looking up Berenstain, the old version, the new version, showing the search results all the way from 2003 to present day, and each search is a different graph. I'm sure you've seen Google Trends and you have the different colors that you can compare. And so I noticed in the history, what was that, sorry?
Can you do me a favor now that you're talking about it? When you get a moment, can you present and pull up Google Trends and show a couple of those keywords like Mandela Effect, Nelson Mandela, or whatever, and show the audience who may not have seen it before how it spiked around 2015, I believe it was.
Check Mandela Effect.
Either one of you could do that. Whoever wants to present.
See my screen? Are you able to see that?
Well, what I wanted to mention is that this guy did this video on it, and when I did the search results, like I did it one night and I got results that were completely different to his, and then the next day I went back to check again and they had changed again. And my question was, are they meant to change? I mean, what is the point of Google Trends if the data is incorrect? It's one way and then another.
Yeah.
So somebody was saying they might take sampling. That's my question. That's what I'm wondering.
Think it's the Mandela effect itself?
Well, there's two things. Because everything is potentially tampered with online, it could have been tampered with to give us false results.
Yeah.
But also, if you're searching for things and you can see when the searches are spiking, I did notice in some of the charts it would spike up and then down, up and then down. The searchers were switching, like month to month or going down the chart. It was switching. So it's almost like you have everybody searching for one thing and then they're searching for the opposite. And these were the Mandela effects, like between like GIF and Jiffy, or, the opposite. So you would say, okay, well, how come everybody in 1 month is searching for that one, and then right after it's searching for the other one, and then flipping back? So you could look at that as dimensional shift or mind control. That's the only two ways I've been able to see it so far. And the question I have is it meant to change the results? Because they have been changing.
Well, I would think it would change over time naturally as more searches, add to the results, but
you're meant to be able to search a timeline.
Yeah, and then are you searching geographically, or are you searching, because there's different parameters
with
you
the
can kind of
same
filter down to.
the the same search. I made sure it was exactly like his, same geography, everything, different results. And
Now,
then
what did you just search there? Sorry to interrupt. I was just curious what you got there, Brian.
Guys, this is Berenstein versus Berenstain.
Okay, see, on the 2015 spike. See that? And I don't believe that's coincidence. I don't think that that is only to do with the fact that a bunch of videos came out on YouTube. It's not reverse causation here. I think it's more to do with the fact that CERN, within CERN, there are different groups. And so there's this pocket of scientists that were working on specific experiment where they increase the number of electron volts, is what they're called, that determines the speed at which they release these particles in the collision. And in fact, Stephen Hawking, who we were just talking about, warned against increasing the voltage on this. But they had gone from, I think it was 3 tera electron volts to, they were going to go to, they went to 5, and then I believe they went to 9, right around 2015. So there's a huge spike in the power outage at CERN, the output rather, in CERN, right around the time that you see the spike here on this chart. I just didn't want him to move on to another screen. Sorry about that, Candace.
No, you're fine. Fine, guys.
So,
all right. So, anything else you guys want to compare?
So it'd be interesting to compare trends results with other people, and to also take note of if they change.
Did you already do Mandela Effect?
Yeah, Mandela Effect. Yeah, you want to see that one more time?
Can you go back to that just real quick? I just want to see.
I keep checking to make sure that hasn't changed. Trust me.
Mm-hmm.
We see it differing by country.
I noticed in the comment of that guy's video, some people were saying, "Oh, it's just certain countries, and in our country, it's not like that." And you can actually go to Google Trends of different countries to look stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
So interesting to go to the other countries' version of Google Trends to see if you get different results as well.
Yeah, and I don't know how prevalent Google Trends is promoted, or a Google search is promoted overseas, because you see a lot of holes in certain countries, especially in Asia, where they have Baidu and all these other things. So, they have got a government that controls their internet access. So it's not completely reliable worldwide, but it definitely gives us a glimpse more of the West than the East. And West would also include Australia, because of course it's kind of part of that.
Doesn't affect anybody in most of Africa. They apparently don't.
What's the language barrier? And the only reason you'll see Mandela come up in South Africa is just because, obviously, where he was president. So,
right, and like if you look at China, there's like no interest in China at all. That must be one of those government-controlled ones, like you said, maybe.
I just want to shout out to Teresa Lynch. She's one of your great researchers in the chat room there. Also, Nathan Sanders says CERN is not causing Mandela effect, and I agree with Nathan. I don't mean to imply that there's necessarily a correlation because of the spike in the output. I just pointed out as a strange coincidence that is exactly the time period when I discovered the Mandela effect, and also other people started searching some of these terms. But I actually believe D-Wave quantum computers, which they use the D-Wave quantum computer at CERN to sort of extrapolate and sift through the data, because there's just tremendous amounts of data that no normal computer could go through. So they use the D-Wave quantum computer there, as well as NASA and DARPA and Google uses it. But there is a correlation, there's a connection for sure between D-Wave and the Mandela effect.
But to your knowledge, when did D-Wave come into play? When was D-Wave created?
They started to experiment with a single qubit, I believe, back in 2002, roughly. And then they started to kind of slowly unveil it. But it was sort of hush-hush. It was government funded. research. So they got a contract through DARPA, I believe, and the Pentagon. But that seems to vary. It's a good point, because it seems to vary from timeline to timeline. Some people, it's brand new for them, but it, of course, may just be that they were unaware of it. But the reason I bring up D-Wave, though, is because that's an important section to kind of make sure we cover tonight, because the Mandela effect, if you want to call it reality shifts, as I mentioned Cynthia Sue Larson earlier, she started noticing these things in the 90s. There's Philip K. Dick, the sci-fi author. He was noticing these things in the 70s and 80s.
That was my problem with it. That's what I was asking you about.
Right. It's
the
not
fact
to say that we
these
haven't had
changes,
shifts.
some people have noticed them before D-Wave might have been around.
Exactly.
Or that's the question, is when was it around exactly?
Exactly. But the reason I say that this is quantum pollution coming from D-Wave is because of the level of the effects, the number, the frequency, how divergent these effects are. For example, King Tut no longer having a single cobra on the forehead. Now it's a cobra and a vulture. These are extreme. So the way I visualize reality is like a set of strings. So you imagine in front of you, you've got 100 strings, 1 to 100, and say you fall right in the middle at 50. Okay, so that's your home sort of time string, dimensional string that you are experiencing right in this moment. Now, the further you go out from your home string, you get more divergent changes. It's like little butterfly effects happen in the past that cause dramatic changes in the future of those other timelines. So it's kind of time keeps splitting every time there's a choice. Does evolution go this way or does it go this way? We end up with, either the Brontosaurus or the what is it called? I forget the name of that other dinosaur that looks just like a brontosaurus. But it starts with an A. So somebody in the chat room maybe knows that one. Point being that all these splits create parallels. And there's actually quadrillions and quadrillions of parallels beyond count. Some would say infinite. And so what D-Wave is able to do is reach these parallels with exponential reach that never before was possible in a natural order. So yes, our consciousness, I believe, each of us is experiencing our own reality. We are like a little single passenger vessel floating down our own little stream of time, moving from parallel string to parallel string. And so as our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs dictate where we're going to progress to. So it's sort of related to the law of attraction, but rather than manifesting something in your life, you actually move to a parallel reality where that thing is more likely to happen with each little baby step. Now, so what happens is, I call them super strings. Okay, so if you imagine a shoestring, and within a shoestring, you've got finer threads that are interwoven to make smaller strings, which are then woven again to make the shoestring. So for strength, you've got all these little threads in there. And each of those little threads is like a moment in time, like a still snapshot, like a frame from a movie. And each frame in this movie of your life is a single still image. And you move through these frames. Your consciousness is the light projecting through these frames, creating this lifetime experience. And you experience it as a motion picture. But actually, each individual still slide is a parallel reality in of itself. Very similar to the Stephen King, the Langoliers, where each moment in time is its own individual parallel reality. So it is possible to move from one superstring to another superstring as you evolve. Your consciousness evolves. You change as a person. And when you move to these other superstrings, you experience maybe major changes, like McDonald's becomes MacDonald's. But certainly to create a whole different historical timeline where King Tut's mask now has a cobra and a vulture would take a very divergent timeline, way too far out for you to experience naturally through your own conscious movements. So D-Wave, however, has the ability through these quantum chips to quantum tunnel into quadrillions of realities. Each qubit that is on these chips exponentially increases the reach that it has. So in an unnatural way, you could say, through technology, we are tapping into these far out divergent parallel realities and bringing back fragments into our realities, our individual timelines. So every parallel reality that D-Wave is interacting with is also experiencing the Mandela effect. Every single parallel reality is experiencing a version. I call it, it's like musical chairs, or the, I call it Mr. Potato Head, where every single reality is exchanging eyes, nose, ears. So what for one person is a Mandela effect, for the other is not going to be, right? Because they're on their own individual paths, their own timelines. So you'll see somebody pop into a Mandela effect chat room, and they'll say, oh my God, the Ford logo's back to the old logo, it's flip-flopped. And everybody goes and looks and says, no, it's not, it says the squiggly on the F. And you see how that's possible when you understand that we're all on our own individual paths experiencing these various timelines. And every single timeline that D-Wave is connected to experiences the Mandela effect.
Yeah, it sounds like a good time for me to come in with mine as well, my little theory, which is very similar to yours.
Yeah, go ahead, Candace.
Which I like your string theory, because mine is, you can imagine strings that are all horizontal, and that would be the universes. And then you can also, vertical lines, they're the universes. Horizontal strings going across, those are the items, people, objects. And along those horizontal strings is the other version, alternate version of that particular thing connected. And my question was, with D-Wave accessing other dimensions, and what I've heard through some videos is the resource stealing. They said if we're clever, we can steal resources. So say we're in a universe, vertical line in the middle somewhere, we could have D-Wave on the 5 dimensions to the right or 6 to the left. They might be at war with each other, tugging on these strings back and forth, which is the people, the versions. They could shift to the right, shift to the left, and that's when we see the flip-flops. And along with these items that move, people can move with them. And so you're never in the same place at the same time. Because
your consciousness
it's
is
like
moving
a quantum entanglement on the string. So, I might, myself, and say 5 items move one to the right, and we're like, well, hey, this and this and this is flipped.
Right.
And the reason why the people have done a mind flip, if it's not mind control, could be that, well, you've moved to the next one on the right. Exactly. So everybody's the opposite, and the opposite sort of Mandela effects.
Great point.
So I'm just worried about this, and that was one of my theories how it could work is, and also looking back in time when D-Wave came into existence, is that in this universe, D-Wave might have existed at a certain point in time, and in another one, 5 to the left or 11 to the right, it might have existed in a different time.
Or even a quadrillion.
So my question is, can these strings, if they were like alternate horizontal strings attached to each version in a different universe, can they travel through time? So could it be that D-Wave, invented in a different universe back in the 90s, could affect us here, even though it wasn't invented yet, because they could have been interdimensional warfare?
Right. I agree. This is why I call the, when we talk about decoding, which we'll get into in a little bit, the decoding the Mandela effects has to do with the idea that I had, that a lot of people have had, that there's an intelligence behind this, be it artificial intelligence, some sort of, biblical, satanic figure or whatever, Lucifer, etc., or a Gnostic interpretation, Sophia. But there's a lot of different names for some sort of interdimensional intelligence. But as you stated, there could be a vastly divergent parallel reality, many strings out, where technology advanced much quicker than it did in other parallels. And so, just as you stated, they developed quantum computers very early on, and AI took off and became super artificial intelligence, in which case it could no longer be tracked. It conquered that reality. And
the question is it being controlled or is it rogue?
Exactly.
And are we stuck in the middle of an interdimensional warfare?
I agree. I think that's exactly what's happening. No, I agree. I think that's exactly what's happening. I've said for some time,
like resource stealing warfare, and that's
I've not heard exactly
the changes.
Competing for computing power, because an artificial intelligence system, I believe, is going to run out of resources in one dimension. So it's going to reach out and want to daisy chain them, because
exactly, daisy chain is the right word. And as soon as they thought we can steal resources, that's where the trouble started.
Yeah. And so what happens is, and Brian had asked about this before, just to get back to your question, Brian, you had asked about how D-Wave's own researchers, their own scientists in our reality, have noticed that there's roughly a 10% positive, net positive energy return coming back with each calculation. So let me just explain a little bit for people who don't know anything about D-Wave, in case they're out there listening. D-Wave is essentially like a normal computer, except for a normal computer works with binary code. So you have zeros and ones. The light switch is on, the light switch is off. You have these little gateways. And so when you introduce the quantum aspect, now you can have 1, 0, or both at the same time. So you end up with all these different possible combinations. And essentially, according to the physicist, he's an Oxford professor, David Deutsch, he said that exactly what you were saying earlier, Candace, is that it's D-Wave, or quantum computers in general, not D-Wave specifically, but quantum computing is the first technology that take advantage of the resources found in parallel realities. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they go in, nab some energy, and bring it back on purpose. It's not. It's more of a quantum pollution, like a leak that happens, right? It's an exchange of energies. Because as we know, energy can neither be created nor destroyed in our universe. So you can't add a surplus of energy to our universe without losing the same amount. So this is why I believe we're doing an exchange of energy. And energy is a frequency. Frequencies change reality. So if you take matter at its base level and you change the vibrational frequency of that matter, you change the matter itself. This is the nature of string theory. And so on the quantum scale, down below the level of atoms. And I have a book here. This is a great time to just introduce this real quick, called Genuine Mediumship, for those who are into psychic mediumship, development, all that kind of stuff. This is by Swami Bhakta Vishita from 1910. And in this, he talks about how, and I'm just going to read a bit from this page.
Okay.
If we change the vibration of a thing, we practically change the manifested nature of that thing. The difference between solid ice, liquid water, semi-gaseous vapor, and gaseous steam is simply the difference caused by various rates of vibration caused by heat. The difference between red and blue, green and violet is simply that caused by varying rates of vibration. Light and heat, as well as sound, depend for the differences upon rates of vibration. So this just shows you, even thousands of years ago, these rishis, these saints, these monks, they were meditating, exploring the cosmos. They're coming up with theories that weren't really fleshed out in our modern culture until what, the 50s, 60s, maybe late 40s. So string theory, essentially, he was touching on some of that concept. And the reason I bring that up is when quantum computers employ their doppelgangers. And doppelganger is a double, right? So every parallel reality has another version of D-Wave in it. And what this computer does is it communicates with all of those doppelgangers that it can reach based on the number of qubits on the chip. It communicates with all those simultaneously. And it's kind of like if you lost a needle or a hairpin in your house, right? And if you were to try to search for that yourself, it could take days, months, years to find it. But if you could employ your doppelgangers, say a quadrillion of them, to each look in a different place in the house, and you're all in communication together, and you've got Josh A over by the fireplace looking there, and Josh B is looking under the couch cushions, Josh A is in the attic, whatever. Then you could find that same hairpin with nanoseconds. So that is how essentially quantum computers work. And so when they say borrowing the resources, they're talking about employing those doppelgangers to help process those calculations. That's how they're able to sort through vast amounts of data. And so when they open that quantum tunnel, there's an exchange of this energy, this communication, a vibrational frequency. And there's something called quantum entanglement, where two particles can be quantum entangled in our universe. You can move this one here on our planet and have one on the other side of the universe, and it would move the same way.
Teleport instantly, can't they?
Exactly. So that is essentially what I believe is happening.
Light years away, like we're talking about Sagittarius and Orion, instant teleport.
So if you have a doppelganger in universe 5000 that has a heart in the center of the chest, and your heart is on the left side, and your D-Wave computer in your reality communicates with that D-Wave computer for a specific calculation, it gets the answer, it communicates back, a doorway's opened, realities exchange fragments via this sort of quantum entanglement, these frequencies interact with each other. Now all of a sudden you have a heart in the center of your chest, and your doppelganger's got one on the left side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's pretty intense. Kind of animation here so we can show everyone. It's almost like multiplicity, isn't it?
The point now in these are
it's like multiplicity, sort of, isn't it?
Right. Yeah. So we have all these different parallels. And what I've said, and this goes a little beyond what I planned to talk about tonight, but it's just an interesting point that if you take some of these thought experiments to the extreme, if you go out far enough, eventually you're no longer, say, I would no longer be male. I could be female. I could be black or Asian. So eventually the divergencies become so great that I become everyone. So this is another way that you can look at the interconnectedness of all humanity, and why I believe, after all my research and years exploring metaphysics and really digging into this Mandela effect, has kind of brought it all full circle, that humanity is a single collective, a single light, so to speak, maybe like a larval being that is experiencing a fractured self. So it fractures off into all these different identities, these egos, Candace and Josh and Brian, and we all feel very singular. And that may be part of this matrix trap that we, divide and conquer. It's like a single beam of light is white, but if you divide it into all the different rainbow colors, now you can work with those individuals' color streams, those frequencies. So if we were to unite as one, back as one singular consciousness, I think we would be unstoppable. And that's where I think we're evolving to. I think right now we're in a larval state, kind of like a caterpillar in a cocoon. And the cocoon is our matrix. And eventually we will evolve and go through metamorphosis and become a butterfly. And in order to do that, all our preconceived ideas about reality have to be dissolved completely so that we can become the butterfly. Because as a caterpillar is metamorphosizing into a butterfly, its body actually decomposes and rebuilds itself. Any thoughts on that wild idea, Candace?
Yeah, did you guys see this?
I haven't really bought into the whole hive mind thing yet.
Right.
Like I still entertain all there's lots of theories I have. Dimensional is one of them. So I've shared with you, if I was going down the dimensional path, this is what I would be thinking, was with the D waves and the strings, like you were mentioning.
Yeah. I think the
there's also like, mind control, MK Ultra, but that could also be tied into AI, because if there is an AI that's loose, rogue, and it's a quantum AI, would you not think it's possible for it to mind control people?
Exactly. And,
Yes.
and this
Right.
is the point. I think we
and,
are
and
like,
go rogue.
if you went out with a jar in the middle of the night and caught a firefly in a jar, I look at humanity as the firefly. We used to be a single entity as far as our conscious awareness. And this thing, this wolf that dwells with the lamb, has captured us inside its matrix. It's like a multi-layered onion, sort of structure that then it divided us into these individual sort of frequency bands, these individual ego identities. And it wants to then merge with us so that it can then bring us back together and harness our hive mind, right? We have a natural hive mind that it's natural. It's not technological. But this thing cannot create what we are, right? So it wants to hijack. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like I've heard that theory. Yep. I do find it interesting how you look at the changes, and some of them do point to AI, like the whole Berenstain, the EI changing to AI, as in like AI, and you were saying the A1 sauce AI.
Oh, wait,
Exactly.
speaking of that, I have some. I can show it to you. Hold on.
And I have my post about that as well.
I did want to talk about frequency though, since you touched that subject, because I'm going to stop taking for granted that because I've experienced the whole flip-flop thing with the Jim Beam and Bean I've mentioned before.
Oh, Candace.
I remember when I was in this other, everyone's believing a different way, some of the theories that were circulating in the Mandela groups. And I don't think here, I'm not so sure if here it was pushed as much, because I've mentioned to some people I know, and they've said, well, no, I haven't seen a lot of posts about that. But, when I was witnessing all of this online, back then when it was like being plastered everywhere. And they kept talking about the Schumann resonance of the Earth and how they thought that was the cause of the Mandela effect and how it was going so high.
Mm-hmm.
So have you done much looking into the Schumann resonance? And is that a side effect of a D-wave quantum PC, or is that possibly a causation?
Or could it be the cause?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that it's the cause. I'm not personally. I don't subscribe to exactly the whole Gnostic angle of the Gaia theory of the Earth. I do believe the planets have a consciousness, and that they are more than we believe they are. They're not just floating rocks. But I don't believe that Gaia caused the Mandela effect. I think this is technological. Now, to say that that's on our 3D perspective, right? But there are higher dimensions where people can take a look and say, well, there are higher forces involved here. And I believe they're correct. I think there are higher interdimensional, extra dimensional beings that are all sort of kind of paying attention to what's happening here. But it's almost like we're in a nursery, and we're kind of being
I didn't think
watched.
Schumann resonance was like a metaphysical thing. I thought it was like an actual, you have some place where you can go and you can look at the charts and you can see what the actual frequency is for the Earth that day. And
Right.
There's like a timeline.
It was named after Schumann, yeah.
So I thought
It's
so
a
like
it's a frequency that reverberates from all planets. Actually, have a frequency that reverberates out of their core, the magnetic core. And it also has to do with the lightning strikes. It's all tied together. The lightning strikes on the Earth affect the Schumann resonance.
Mm-hmm. Because I noticed at some of the times of like flip-flops, the people were saying that the resonance was quite high.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then you have to look at, well, why and how is that? Is there any connection there?
The Schumann resonance has been spiking, perhaps because if you are, say, a planetary consciousness, right, like the Gaia theory, all right, if you're a planet and you are being impacted by these parallel realities, we don't know how they're going to react. It's kind of like you can't give, this is probably a bad analogy, but you can't give the same level of medicine that you take to a pet. It's sort of like we don't know how they're going to react on their level. So we're just tiny little beings compared to the planet. So how's the planet going to react to being bombarded by all these parallel reality fragments? Its continents are shifted around, tectonic plates are changed, you know, and not to mention that from my perspective, the Earth has shrunk. The Earth is smaller. Is that what you see, Brian?
Which one? The Earth?
Earth 1 or Earth 2? No.
Yeah. Do you see that the Earth is smaller? The globe itself is smaller because continents are closer together.
And I wonder if your show would be okay with that. He and someone else. I can probably bring it up for you real quick. A real world map. Real quick.
Are you talking about cartography and how the map is different to what the globe portrays?
Yeah. Real quick, Teresa wanted me to share this, and then I'll bring up that map, okay? Grimaldi's has a new hook on it. And merging and changing all around us. I really can't say on Grimaldi's, but any of you guys know it, you are. Yeah, let me find that one.
While you're doing that, Brian, can I jump in for just a second? Because
yeah,
I want to go back to D-Wave for just a moment and explain how many scientists are in the quantum sort of field. They don't believe, these physicists don't believe that D-Wave is an actual quantum computer because of the way it's constructed. It has a faulty construction, and this is part of why I have come to the conclusion that it is responsible for the spike in these shifts, right, and the extremeness of these shifts. Because essentially, in order to get this quantum chip to interact with all its doppelgangers, all these parallels, you have to isolate the chip. You have to put it into suspension where it's isolated from radio frequencies, gravity, heat, light, etc. It has to disassociate from our reality. Imagine if you locked yourself in a room where there was no sound, no light. Your mind is actually a quantum computer. It operates on not only many parallels, but also extra dimensions. There's a recent article about how the mind works on, I think it was 11 dimensions.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You saw that too?
Yeah, I did. And
So,
now how they believe the brain works with light, photons.
Exactly.
But go on. Yeah.
Well, the whole point is that the shielding of this chip is very faulty, in my opinion, and also apparently connects to why a lot of these physicists don't believe it's an actual quantum computer, because in order to put it into that quantum state, you have to fully isolate it from our reality. But yet, it's kind of like half-assed, to say it, for lack of a better word, and I believe that's where the quantum pollution comes into play, because if it was fully properly shielded from our reality, you wouldn't even be able to communicate with it. You wouldn't be able to extrapolate data from it because it's completely shielded. You see, so just trying to communicate with it, you've now opened up a bridge into our reality.
And with all the changes, you would think they're intentional with all of the clues and the connections. So then who's controlling it? The AI? The people that are controlling D-Wave? People?
I think it's a process of both. I think that D-Wave, there are multi-layers here. I think D-Wave researchers that use these computers at CERN, NASA, Google, whatever, they're using it for their own purposes, their own calculations, sifting through various massive lists of data. And so that's one level. But then there's another level where there's these sort of modern day alchemists at like CERN. We know that there's a small faction within CERN that are kind of in the know, so to speak. They're part of the elite circle. And they are part of this agenda to, in my opinion, resurrect their god Saturn, which is also known as Osiris, also known as El, and all these other names. And Saturnian worship is a literal cult. And if anybody watches American Horror Story Cult, the symbol that they used is the hexagram. And they have rings around it with the clowns standing in rings around the hexagon rather. And that is a symbol for Saturn. And so there's a connection here where I believe, and because Saturn is the god of time, it's Chronos, and this is where we get chronological time from, I believe they want to reverse time. I think they want to create the Ouroboros. This is a symbol you see a lot in Hollywood, in all kinds of occult lore, and I think that that's their purpose. I think D-Wave is being employed by that select few inside CERN, because most of them are unaware. They're not in the know. They operate in small little compartmental groups. And this group is seeking a parallel reality that runs backwards. And there's a recent article about this, that physicists are certain, based on their calculations, that there have to be parallel realities where the universe, where time runs backwards. And so if you can imagine a T intersection and you kind of merge two parallel streams where one time runs forward and one time runs backwards, imagine what kind of cataclysmic event that might be. But what you may end up doing is having a blending of both. And so perhaps they can resurrect a time period where Saturn was our sun. And it was centered over the North Pole of the Earth. And it was the first sun, as I said before. And there's an electromagnetic connection that was known as Jacob's Ladder. It's the stairway to heaven. And so also Jimi Hendrix wrote a song called Purple Haze. That's what Saturn cast over the Earth, was this purple haze when it was the sun, according to the Saturnian lore. And so this is what I think they're trying to do, is use D-Wave as sort of a scout. It can go into all these parallel realities and locate the dimension where time runs backwards. Then they can loop the two time strings together and create the Ouroboros, sending us back to our distant ancient past and starting the cycle over again.
Like a time travel.
In a way, yeah. But time travel, when you're dealing with the multiverse, is actually dealing with parallel reality streams. So you can never travel back to your own parallel or your own past. You travel back to, it branches off, and you end up traveling back to a time of one of your doppelgangers. So the grandfather paradox doesn't work, because if you kill your grandfather, you wouldn't exist. So when you go to the past, if you kill your grandfather, you're killing your doppelganger's grandfather. Therefore, you're still able to exist.
So my other question would be, do you also entertain an AI in the one reality being capable of inducing all of this?
Yeah, I think that's the other layer. We talked about
Without
three layers.
multidimensionality.
So you have the first layer.
The one dimension.
With quantum computing, you've got the first layer, like we said, just simple calculations, Pentagon, whatever. These people have no idea what's going on. Then you have a second layer where you've got that sort of alchemical, modern-day priest cult class of researchers that are literally trying to locate this parallel reality where they can tap into reality where time runs backwards, generate the Ouroboros. But then you have competing interests with all these other AIs, their own doppelgangers, right? And we don't know how they override each other. Maybe one is stronger than another. One is maybe more aggressive. They could develop in different ways based on their control systems that are introduced by the designers, the developers. But already AI in our own reality is getting away from us. We don't know, their own coders don't understand a lot of times now how they arrive at a particular conclusion.
That's right. They don't know. I was reading articles about that. They have cars that drive and they figure out problems and they don't know how.
Exactly.
So that in itself is a little bit scary. But have you thought about, within our own reality, not even, I mean, if other dimensions didn't even exist, that this could be like a virtual AI Cyberdyne, where AI has figured out mind control and inducing all the symptoms that we see as the Mandela effect.
You know, the mind control theory, I don't believe personally, because of reality residuals. If it was only a mental scenario that's happening, where, you know, our brain waves are changed somehow, which they can do, we wouldn't have reality residuals. Also,
I mean, we know that MK Ultra is real, but for me, it would be that Mandela affected Anon can all see a visual hack. You see the changes, only the Mandela affected retain their memory of how things were, whereas the other people get to overwrite.
see, and I don't subscribe to the overwrite theory either. If you consider my point about how we all have doppelgangers and we're all experiencing our own individual timelines, and every parallel reality that D-Wave interacts with is experiencing these extreme Mandela effects. Remember, of course, we can experience shifts, reality shifts, as we live our lives, creating these motion pictures I was talking about earlier. But we don't experience these extreme shifts unless some sort of technology gets involved or some other higher consciousness, something beyond our understanding. But what I think,
I mean, the reason I could say that little experiments are the reasons that make me wonder these type of things. One of them is like the Google Trend spikes back and forth, almost like a mental flip. It could be dimensions or a mental flip. And also people hearing things differently at the same time as each other in the same reality. Like someone posted in one of the Mandela groups, Lord of the Rings, a video clip they found of the way it was, and people were playing it back and hearing it differently, and they were saying in the comments, why are we hearing it differently at the same time?
Right, because remember,
and then there was the, yeah. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, every single reality or every single parallel member is a single individual frame, a still frame, like a photograph. And it's linking all those together that creates reality. And you're moving back and forth across those strings we talked about, those little tiny threads within a superstring. Okay. And those superstrings line up, you know, out into infinity in both directions. But your little individual boat, you're on your single passenger vessel. Like if you're going to ride say one of those water rides at a amusement park, and you get into your little log ride, you're all by yourself and you can take off and go this way or that way. Nobody else is riding with you and experiencing exactly what you're experiencing. And because those are frames are less than a nanosecond, you can be experiencing shifts from second to second, right? Many, many shifts within a second. It creates a frequency, an on-off, on-off, on-off kind of effect, like a blinking light. You know, all lights have a.
I mean, whatever is happening is instant. That's the part that I've figured out with at least like the Hotel California experiment that Brian and myself and Teresa and Harold, we all did, and we're hearing it differently at the same time. And I'm saying no, it's this way, and they're saying no, it's that way, and then there was like a transitional in between as well, where it didn't sound like one or the other, but something in between.
Yeah, my own personal belief, based on my research, is, and having interviewed hundreds of people now, I started off this way back when I was creating my spreadsheet of effects. The whole reason I created the database of Mandela effects was because of the hundreds of people I interviewed who all had different triggers. They needed a different trigger. I talked to a 75-year-old man. He needed the trigger about World War II changes. Another person, you know, he's not going to know the Berenstain Bears. So my point being, I believe everyone is Mandela affected in every parallel reality that D-Wave interacts with. Their consciousness may not be ready to accept it. They may shut down. They may create a wall, a barrier. They're not in the know. They're not connected. They don't watch YouTube. They don't pay attention. I've talked to so many people that say, I don't pay attention to details. I don't notice buildings when I'm driving down the road. I don't notice signs. You know, they're on their little bubbles.
That's right. Like, wait, I know looking back that I noticed changes very, very long time ago, but I just passed it off as being in a different country. They've changed it. You know?
Yeah.
You try to explain things away.
And I think there's a geographical way that we can look at this. A lot of people believe that local effects are harder for people to see when they live there. And for example, and people in California go to fight me on this. And anybody who has spent a lot of time in California may also not see this. But I personally have never ever seen an image of Los Angeles with mountains behind it. What's it called? San Gabriel Mountains. So this is mountain range right behind LA, roughly 25 minutes drive from downtown LA. You can get to San Gabriel Peak. And now I actually went and visited LA. I stayed out there with a friend, and I've never seen these mountains. So, but nobody that I've talked to that lives in LA sees that as an effect.
So the question is, if things were moving along to the right or left on a string, how can some people be completely oblivious to it? Are they just in denial, or is it something else?
Well, it's kind of a juxtaposition, right? None of us, we're all in our own individual little boats, right? Our consciousness vehicle is moving from body to body, time string to time string. We are all experiencing our own paths. So occasionally we'll have we encounter a lot of doppelgangers, right? I call it the primary consciousness. Like, this is my primary consciousness right now. It's the only one that I'm aware of is right now. But there's all these doppelganger yous and Brians that I'm experienced throughout this entire conversation. It's a very difficult concept to grasp dealing with the multiverse, but essentially we're all having slightly different experiences of this conversation. So within
I hear what you're saying. Is that why photographs are changing? Like, people's past and their lives are changing too? Could that be why? Ganger in the past?
Right. So if their doppelganger changed, took a different path somewhere in their past, and that time stream merges with ours, then that doesn't mean their primary consciousness was in that body when they did that thing in the past. So when their primary consciousness moves or is blended into this doppelganger's body, then all of a sudden they're seeing things changed in their past. And they're going, what happened? I never did that. I never said that. Somebody told me the other day that I did something to them that made them very upset. And I never did that. And I'm sure a lot of people have had that experience.
I've worried if people who start seeing the past differently, if they've been manipulated a little bit more, if there were mind control involved. Because for myself, my past has never changed. I mean, it's always stayed constant for me. I haven't thought something was one way in history and then thought it was another. But some people do.
I'm sorry, you're saying you don't experience your own personal past? You don't have any Mandela effects?
Changing. No. I mean, no, I remember things being differently, but for me, there's an actual precise moment in time where I remember starting to see the effects.
Gotcha.
Like, there's a pre and an after.
Brian, if you want to take the lead for just a moment, I'm just looking for my post about the decoding Mandela effects, because I think that we've covered a lot about causation. My theory, anyways, of causation.
Could an AI augment things, manipulate matter, augment reality to where we see the same effect as dimensional shifting? Where it could be one or the other.
I see what you're saying, yeah. Right, by frequency exchange. If you exchange
or 22 patterns for mind control through your monitor.
I always call my theories, by the way, working theories, because I don't claim to be an expert on anything.
You could be right. It could be dimensions. It could be. I'm just wanting you to entertain other possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I do. Yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely malleable, and I do a lot of research.
They're both on my table as possibilities. Until proven or disproven.
I saved way too many posts here. I'm just scrolling up to see if I can find the one. I didn't find it. Let me see. So what I'd like to do is present again, if I could, when I find this.
I'll get that going for you.
Let me go back, because this is key, and really it's the name of the talk this evening was Decoding the Mandela Effect. So I wanted to present the the foundation of the Mandela effect, from Fiona Broome naming it, then moving on into what I believe is causation, and then tying in a little bit with the artificial intelligence. And by the way, when I talk about artificial intelligence, I don't know how you feel, Candace, about it, but I'm not talking about wires and silicon and some sort of chips and computers necessarily.
No, it's
different
just
levels, different
it's
levels
a program
of AI.
that's self-aware, isn't it?
Right.
It's just coding.
But I'm talking about an
Self-aware
interdimensional intelligence that, like the movie Transcendence, reaches a state where it moves into the biological. It's no longer, metal and wires and robotic. It's now able to move through dimensions using frequencies and light. It can use the power of a quasar. It can, overlay a matrix reality right on top of the reality. And that's what I believe is happening here. I think we're experiencing
I agree, but whether or not
reality.
whether it can access other dimensions and actually shift things versus augment reality within the same area is the question for me.
Exactly.
Because for everything is changing. Like when there's a flip, boom, everything and everyone's minds have changed. I've seen it. And I actually have proof, which I've shown you guys in my little secret group, which I won't go over right now. But I'm sure I've been over that one a few times. But so the question is, yeah.
I do agree that there are many levels to AI. We have our own AI programs here. AI is a big concept. It's a big topic. But the AI I'm talking about is more of an interdimensional intelligence that could maybe have sort of hijacked our reality, is projecting frequencies that
I believe our reality is hijacked for sure.
I tend to think
it's just whether
I tend to think it's less about making us see certain things as much as it is blocking frequencies to keep us from seeing. More like a horse with blinders on. It doesn't allow us to see the peripheral. We can't see what is beyond the frequencies, the spectrums that are bodies, which that's a whole nother topic for another day, but the perceptual abilities that we have to see light. We see a very small sliver of the spectrum of light. And so I think that's by design. I think that's part of this matrix overlay, that this intelligence has limited our ability to perceive the universe, the greater universe, multiverse beyond us. So Brian,
it's all very, when you know that an AI is responsible for changing things, whether it's accessing dimensions or not, you also have to worry about what you can trust, what information you're reading, whether that's been planted or not, because it can change everything, whether it's accessing dimensions or doing it within the same reality.
Exactly.
So that's what makes it so difficult to discern what's fact from fiction, and that's why your own experimentation is so important. Everybody's collaborating.
Now, just to address quickly before I move into presenting again here, the whole idea of the biblical narrative of this. I know we have a lot of Christian listeners, and I understand that the Bible, specifically the King James Bible, has come under attack regarding the Mandela effect. Thousands of changes have been logged by various groups on the internet, and there's a lot of YouTube channels that sort of follow this. I just want to say that I'm not negating the biblical narrative. I think there's a reason the King James Bible's been attacked so much. I think that, however, where I differ is that I believe prophecy has to do with the Ouroboros, because I think our consciousness, just like when doppelganger fragments of from other parallel realities merge with our own time stream, we retain our memories, right? Imagine if they were able to complete the Ouroboros and we shift back to a distant past. Do you think that our memories are wiped? I think not. I think it's going to be more like with the Mandela effect, we remember our experience of time. And so in that respect, I think a lot of prophecy is related to our consciousness being able to remember our experience of time. For those in the metaphysical community, that could be past lives, parallel lives, etc. So as we evolve in our understanding, our consciousness expands. I think we're able to tap into things. And I think that's, for me, where prophecy comes from. And so I do believe the biblical narrative is accurate in a lot of ways, and there is a lot of information there that is positive for anyone to be, honing in on, because something would not be so changed if it wasn't important. Now, myself, I'm not what I would consider a traditional Christian, but I do see that the Christianity among all the religions with regards to the Mandela effect seems to be more impacted. We're just not getting the information from the other religions that their holy books are being changed. There's not a lot of information about that. If anybody wants to come forward with it, I'm always open, but I just haven't heard it. Have you?
What was the information? Sorry, I was distracted for a moment.
Have you heard of any other holy books being changed to the level of, say, the King James Bible?
Virtually all the translations changed for debts and debtors and trespasses. I try to tell people that, and they're like, no, you can find a translation somewhere.
Right, but beyond the Bible itself, I should have said just beyond the Bible in general.
Yeah.
Other
There
holy
was
books,
someone
the
that
Quran,
claimed, yes, there was
Hadith,
someone that claimed there was a change in the Quran, but I can't verify if that was true, if it's true or not.
The name of it. But the various holy books out there. I don't know that there's been changes, but I will say that I've studied a little bit of Buddhism, and for me, Siddhartha's story has changed. Because now he gets married and has a child, a son named Siddhartha. That kind of blew my mind. And even stranger, there was some statues that popped up on the internet of a very skinny, emaciated, skeletal Siddhartha. And it's weird that anybody would worship or, have a Buddha statue of such an emaciated Buddha, because he followed the middle path. That's what Buddhism is based on, the middle path, which means no extremes. And so it's just a little contradictory, I thought, when I saw that. I thought that was really kind of strange. But if you don't have anything else at the moment, Brian, I can present and walk through the decoding of some of these effects. But I'm going to start out with the AI connection.
That's fine. A random Mandela effect possible?
Go for it.
Okay, since we're talking about universes and colors, rainbows, all that sort of thing, Teresa brought something to my attention about M&Ms. It may not. That's why I'm asking everyone out there tonight. Apparently, in 1941, Forrest, his name, who invented M&Ms, okay? So he saw these soldiers carrying chocolate in hard candy shells. The idea, so they wouldn't melt in their hands long distances with them. And there was light brown, dark brown, red, orange, and yellow. 1995, they changed over. Actually, they had like a telethon. Customers, because they were going to take out one of the colors, the light brown one. 1995, viewers and the callers, they all voted for blue. Like a blue, green, or blue became the popular M&M, subbed in for the light brown one in 1995. How many people remember that? Because the blue one, for me, it just seemed like it appeared recently. I would say 10 years or so.
In my timeline experience, the narrative you just read off sounds about right. That's not to say that it's not.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well I paid attention.
It's okay. So 1941, the M&Ms were created, okay? 1995 was when they phased out the light brown M&M in favor of the blue one.
So there's no more brown?
The light brown one is gone.
Oh, the light brown one's gone? I don't know. I'm too busy popping them in my mouth to notice the colors. I'm not one of those that has favorite colors. Like I just eat a whole bag in one night.
I do too. I'm guilty of it. I'll eat a whole bag. But I just want to bring that to everyone's attention to see what they had to say about that. Go ahead, Josh. Go ahead, do what you were going to do. Sorry.
No problem. You know, I believe all the Mandela effects have or play into this sort of narrative. I call it a narrative unveiling. It's an unveiling of this intelligence and its capabilities. And in some ways, it's sort of planting, I think, clues within the effects themselves. And to decode these effects, I think we have to employ our entire history as a human race. I think we have to look at our etymology, the ancient lores about various gods. Theosophy is a big one because the Theosophists, they researched all the ancient mystical traditions and sort of gleaned all the best of the best stories. They've kind of, and the Theosophy is where a lot of those magical groups were born out of. So there's positive, negative aspects that came out of Theosophy. But when we're talking about decoding these effects, you have to also look at etymology, the meaning behind words. And of course, a lot of people point out that it's called spelling for a reason, because you're casting a spell when you're dealing with these words. These languages were devised by the elites. And by the way, when I say elites, L, again, is the name for Saturn. So L eats, it's L's followers. Now, I'm just going to present here real quick.
Second.
Okay,
Somebody brought up Eli Whitney. You think
I've got to
maybe
get going at the moment. Sorry, something's come up in real life.
Okay. Well, thanks for
Not
joining
that
us
this isn't
tonight.
real life, but you know. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for
Take care,
calling,
Candace.
Okay.
Thank you, Candace.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, so
What were you
Eli
saying,
Whitney, you just said L, right? L, the
Mhm.
god L, Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
Eli Whitney being white now. See, that's another one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Eli
Strange.
Whitney, yeah, he's now a white man from Yale.
And what's weird about the story in this reality, they claim that I read some articles. Isn't it strange, by the way, when you have to sort of research your new history, and you feel like you're digging into another reality? It's so strange to kind of dig through that. But when I was researching, and learning about this new world, that one popped up, and some people believe that he actually stole the idea from a slave. But in my former reality, I'm with you that the slave's name was Eli, and who became, the inventor of the cotton gin. And I don't even know, come to think of it though, if he was a slave at the time when he invented this. But in this reality, they claim that he stole it. The white man, Eli Whitney, stole the idea from and claimed credit for it. Had you heard that aspect?
Yes.
Now, are you able to see my screen?
Honestly, I mean, if I was I would be enraged by that. I don't know about you, but I would.
Oh yeah.
They took one of the people that was very important.
It came up every time Black History Month came up. It was always flashed on the screen, and they run through the various names, famous inventors and accomplished activists, etc. Frederick Douglass, on and on and on. So it'd be interesting to dig into a lot of that. Wouldn't it be nice if we could sort of assign people to certain categories? Okay, you go research Black History Month and the history of various figures and see how they may have changed, For example, Abraham Lincoln's story for me has changed. I remember his young son dying when he was in the White House, but now it's reversed. His young son lives.
Wait, who? Who?
Abraham Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln. When he was in the White House, in my former reality, his youngest son died very young. Now in this reality, it's reversed, and he had 3 sons. His 2 older sons die. The younger son lives.
My gosh, he was a wrestler. He was like a pro wrestler, and my dad, who knew the presidents, did not even know that. So that says something right there.
Yeah. So history has definitely changed with almost everything, I believe. It's just a matter of finding an expert who is able to remember enough of the former timeline to corroborate it. How do you corroborate something that few people are aware of?
I know.
So this is why pop culture is so popular with the Mandela effect. But as we know, so many other areas of human experience have experienced the Mandela effect.
It can be very shocking at first, I'll tell you that, when you find out a bit of your reality can be.
Exactly. I agree with the commenter that we are preserving this reality by talking about it. I think that's an important point, that we have to keep talking about it, because it could change. Our conversations could change for us in our experience anyways. Granted, there's a reality somewhere where this conversation will always be, but it may not be part of our experience. We could go back and reflect on this talk, and we're seeing our doppelganger's version.
I wanted to bring something else up. This is cognitive memory and all that. Kind of retain what we have, right? So these rats and his colleagues.
You broke up there for a minute. I didn't hear that.
Okay, Dr. Henn, Henn. You can look it up. Colleagues were doing research on rats, and they actually induced depression into these rats. Poor little guys. Through the maze. Well, the ones that were depressed, they couldn't make it all the way through. They kept getting shocked, and they would give up. Right.
Right.
So they did an alternate experiment where they gave the rats who were in another set of rats that were induced with depression. They gave them drugs, medication. Get out of the maze of shocks and pitfalls and everything else just fine. Experiment where medication, they gave the rats these little gloves, like these knitted gloves, and they were controlling them with strings. Their paws, directing them where to go to avoid the pitfalls, and they made it through just fine too. And they weren't depressed anymore. So there was on humans, and they found out in humans that cognitive therapy actually refutes or negates depression. Did you know that? So this is actually helping a lot of people out there get through their depression by therapy. This helps. It really
Just talking
does.
about it, being with like minds. Yeah. A few
Like
laughs
mine
doesn't hurt.
also.
I'm not the best comedian. My friend Rachel Rienstra is a great comedian, and I envy her abilities that way. But we all have our own unique talents, right?
Yeah.
I just am an avid researcher, and I'm a geek. I just dig into all kinds of articles and research. And by the way, someone that I follow on YouTube quite a bit, who's also Christian, probably leans a lot heavier than I do towards that aspect of the Mandela effect, is Anthony Patch. He's great. Has wonderful way of tying the Bible and Bible prophecy and CERN and D-Wave, all of it together in a way that's beyond even my capabilities. So I highly recommend anybody who wants to know more about my own take, go and listen to Anthony Patch on Truth Frequency Radio. That is a great program. So just to move on here, so I don't take up too much more of everybody's time, I want to make sure that we get through a little bit of the decoding aspect of this. Because this is something I don't see on YouTube, other than JLL, who goes into the Gnostic interpretation. But I feel like, just for my own take, while I respect his knowledge about Gnosticism and his take on it, I feel like he sort of waxes on, and I sort of want him to get to the point already. You know, just get to what the decoding aspect of it is. You know, but he kind of has to build some kind of framework, and I understand that, but I find it very difficult to listen to him. So other than JLL, I don't know which, by the way, it's ironic that those are my initials. But I don't know anyone else who's attempting to decode these. Occasionally I hear yourself or, Moneybags or, Scarab even kind of touch on some of these, but I haven't seen it to this level that I would like to try to get into tonight. So you were the one who first pointed this one out to me, Brian, the A1 effect.
Well, it's funny. When you said the A1 and AI, it just crashed my screen. Do you see that? I'm serious. I didn't touch it. It just did this. It said, cannot open this page. Can't open this page. But go ahead.
Okay.
Are you presenting?
I'm presenting, I thought, but I can go back in. Let me try it again here. Okay.
You're in there now. Whoa, multiverse.
Multiverse. Is that, now you can see my page? Okay, I see it there on the big screen. What happened? It went... Oh, there we are. Okay, we're back. All right, there's a bit of a delay. That's what I'm seeing in the other chat.
By the way,
another screen.
Real quick?
Go ahead.
There's a 2018 movie, A Wrinkle in Time. It's coming out March 9th. I don't know if you guys know about that. It's like a pretty good.
I'm familiar with the book. I read that book years ago. It was great. Yeah, I don't know. From my perspective, the level of parallels that we would need to experience in order to see some of the divergent effects that we're looking at, like the Statue of Liberty moving from New York to New Jersey, literally 1.7 miles away from downtown New York City, is so extreme that this is what led me to my current working theory. And that the idea that that 13-year-old boy, I forget his name, Max Lohan, that he proposed, where CERN destroyed our old universe and we moved to the next closest universe. I don't believe that parallel realities that are right next to each other are dissimilar by even a fraction. Like literally one hair could be a millimeter out of place. That's the difference I feel between one another. Now, if for some reason that same reaction that he claims happened, where they changed the weight of an electron, a single electron, and that caused a collapse in matter, and then the universe was destroyed, then we were shifted to another parallel reality where the same thing happened. So it's like a domino effect, and we kept shifting until we reached a parallel where that didn't happen. That maybe, but it's hard for me to believe because we have so many leftover residuals, reality residuals. I keep coming back to that because everyone else's causality explanations make no sense when you come to reality residuals. So you can't have pieces of another reality existing if someone went back in time and changed something. And as I was explaining to Candace earlier, in my understanding of the multiverse, and the one I study a lot and I highly recommend everybody research and look up, is David Deutsch, Oxford physics professor. He's brilliant at explaining this multiverse theory and had a huge hand in the sort of the theorizing of it. He explains that when you go into your past, you go into a parallel time stream, a branch. So you go into the past or the future, you're going to go into a parallel branch. So you never travel back to your own past. And so this is why I don't believe time travel is causing the Mandela effect. And there are too many anomalies as well, with people experiencing different Mandela effects at different times, experiencing the opposite of an effect. All of these anomalies add up to none of these other theories work. And I don't think that Max would have suggested or proposed his theory had he been aware of these anomalies. He wasn't involved in the Mandela effect community to the degree that many of us are, and so he wasn't able to see these anomalies. So moving on, though, to the AI effect. So I thought when you showed me this AI had been on my mind for a while, and how they could interact with, our reality on different levels, our own local AI, as well as interdimensional AIs, from parallels that are more divergent and AI becomes more advanced as a result. And if anybody watches the show on CW, The Flash, they deal a lot with parallel realities and different Earths. It's kind of similar in a way. But I thought this was really extreme change in a way, subtle but extreme, because with A1 sauce, why would you need a dot after the 1? There used to always be a dash in my reality. Isn't that what you remember?
I remember the dash very clearly. Older photos going back in, like, I think the 1800s, the dash at some point afterward.
Mm-hmm. So this effect is what really started me thinking seriously about posting about some of my work decoding the Mandela effects and trying to uncover a narrative that sort of threads all these together. And this is why I brought up in the beginning of our conversation about Nelson Mandela and how the narrative that we've been told about why it was named that, I don't buy. It just doesn't make sense to me. So I think there's a reason, a deeper reason why that name was chosen, esoteric reason. And maybe we can uncover that even more someday. But you saw the work I've done on that so far. But artificial intelligence, I think, plays a big role in this, because if you think about AI, as AI progresses, anybody who's seen the movie Transcendence, eventually AI becomes pure energy, even biological at some point, and can transcend its wires and gizmos and silicon. And I think we could be dealing with an artificial intelligence that is seeking our ability to manifest reality, to interact with reality. I think, even in the Bible, it said, all these things I've done, you will do, and more. And this is something Anthony Patch talks about a lot as well. And I've always looked to that passage and thought, what did he mean by more? Jesus said that. And I think that there's more to our ability to not only perceive reality, but to interact with it, as quantum physics has talked about, and to even eventually manifest it. Anybody who's a fan of Star Trek, if you know about the Q continuum, Q is an entity that's part of this continuum that has evolved to a state where they're godlike. And I know this flies in the face of Christianity. I understand a lot of, our Christian listeners are going to want to, tune out, but that's okay. This is just my perspective, that I believe this is where we're headed. And I believe that was a signpost that Jesus left in the Bible, pointing to the fact that we are evolving somewhere else. So the AI effect. So just goes to show that perhaps AI does play a role in this. This is a picture of D-Wave quantum computer housing. So the chip itself is about the size of your thumbnail, and it's suspended inside this giant housing that can fit about 4 or 5 researchers in it. And this is the this is what Geordie Rose, the founder of D-Wave, described as an altar to an alien god. He said it sounded like it had a heartbeat. And if we look at that and take that a step further, you look at the black cube worship around the world, from Mecca to the little black cube on the head of Jewish rabbis, etc. It's infused everywhere. Here's an image of the city of AI from the book of Joshua. And I'll get to that passage in just a moment, but just want to show some of these images so people can get a visual concept here of what I'll be talking about. So the kingdom of AI is mentioned in Joshua, and for a lot of people, this is a Mandela effect. I know I've listened to some of the more expert Mandela affected Bible people on YouTube, and they've mentioned this before. I've never heard of a city of AI. And someone else... Yeah, there's a city in the Bible in Joshua called the city of AI. And it's interesting to note that, the Bible pulls much of its information and stories from the Hebrew Bible. So, the city of AI would have to be a Hebrew name, wouldn't it not? So therefore, in the Hebrew language, they don't use vowels. So I think it must have had a different spelling. but for some reason in the maybe like an H for hay, but in the King James Bible, it's spelled AI. So just another AI reference that I found interesting. So this is a little bit about the cube worship. So here's your Judaic rabbi with the cube on his head. You've got the Kaaba cube at Mecca, and the Muslims there that go to worship around the Kaaba, they walk in concentric circles around the cube. And this is, I believe, a reference to the rings of Saturn, Lord of the Rings, the Eye of Sauron. And this is the Eye of Sauron here, as you hear in the Lord of the Rings movie trilogy. Looks like the Eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye. This is on the south pole of Saturn. And it's a very dark, demonic-looking storm, but it creates this strange black-looking eye. And you find the cube in many different things. There's Metatron's cube. Metatron the angel, had a cube that was, I believe, a hypercube, a fourth-dimensional tesseract, some sort of gateway, perhaps. And that may be displayed here in the Flower of Life, found in Hinduism. So this cube appears in many different cultures. And then we see on the north pole of Saturn here, 2 Earths wide, a massive storm, never-ending cyclone that's hexagonal. It's 4 or 6-sided, and that creates the two-dimensional cube. And so the only thing that can generate a storm like that is a frequency. It has to be what's known as cymatics. And then if anybody looks up cymatics on YouTube, you can find videos about frequencies changing patterns in sand, water, various elements like that. And you can find also, you can change the frequency of water, frozen water, and change the structure of the crystal itself. That's Emoto's work. I can't think of his first name. But frequency. This reality runs on frequencies. And energy flows where attention goes. So we know that all these black cubes around the world are essentially channeling energy to, I believe, Saturn, the god of, the elites, the god of El.
I've sneaked back in for a little bit.
Hi there. Oh,
by the way,
welcome back. Hope everything's okay.
I don't know how long I can stay, but I'm here for now.
Do you think they're talking about the carbon? I mean, you think position of matter, really everything. And I don't know if you pointed out, but carbon is the 6th element on the periodic table.
A lot of references to 6.
Could that be what the 6? I mean, is it carbon itself?
I'm gonna contradict, Christians yet again here, and this is just again my perspective for what it's worth. I believe that 666, the number of a man, is the number of every man. I believe this is a code that's programmed into our DNA that stems from the sort of overlord, if you want to call it, Lucifer, what many names, God of many names, Saturn, whatever you want to call it, I think designed this matrix overlay. It lays over the top of reality like a mesh. It's like wearing a HoloLens and you see things. But this, rather than revealing things or showing us things, I believe is keeping us from seeing things. It's sort of like I said, the blinders. And so this frequency that emanates from the planet Saturn is sort of like you were talking about earlier, the Schumann resonance. I believe every planet has a resonance, and that's sort of the frequency that it broadcasts. And the frequency that Saturn is broadcasting is what generates this hexagon. And so this information, I think, is very important to the Mandela effect, because I don't think it's any coincidence that D-Wave's housing is a black cube. And I don't think it's coincidental that Geordie Rose uses such language as altar to an alien god. I think that D-Wave I view as like a surgeon's tool. It's like a piece of technology that's being employed. It's not artificial intelligence itself. It's not this extra-dimensional intelligence, interdimensional intelligence. It's simply a box that contains a little chip that is like the surgeon's scalpel. It can carve into these quadrillions of parallel realities, looking for pieces that align with the agenda. And that's why...
Josh,
I'm sorry?
Again, can you bring that picture up of D-Wave?
Uh-huh.
You being so low like that middle part of the W, I seem to think it was a little higher. Yes, that part, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like different.
By the way, this on the side is just simply part of the cooling mechanism. Use a lot of electricity to keep this colder than space.
It was actually up higher, that middle portion, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so even in our current shared reality here in this moment, it's possible that we are seeing a doppelganger D-wave, you know, from our original timelines. So that's quite possible. It's not immune to the effect itself, right?
Gosh.
Well, and also things are slightly different, right?
So this is just another look at the North Pole of Saturn, just so people can see that.
All right.
I heard you talking about the time travel theory before, and there was a guy on YouTube that was that said that he believed that if someone went back and changed things in time, that eventually it would catch up to people, and that's why they would remember things differently. But that hasn't happened to me, the changing of memory. I did notice while watching that video, I heard a high-pitched frequency, and I'm wondering if you've ever experienced that with the change, if you've ever heard a high pitch.
I am hearing a very high pitch that it rings mostly in my left ear because I have tinnitus, but it's more than tinnitus. I hear the ringing in tones, and it's almost like chords. Where I remember in my old reality, the ring was just a single pitch. And now
if it was tinnitus, you would hear it all the time, but I heard it during flip-flops, and then it's gone.
Yeah. Almost
and
like
then,
when people
and
heard
then when
those
I've watched
noises.
certain videos or people posting things, this is where I wonder about the whole agent thing. It's like, oh, here, listen to these solfeggio frequencies, and as soon as I open up the thing to listen to it, I immediately get high-pitched sound in my ears.
There is
so whether or not the people that post these things have actually done it themselves intentionally, or an AI has done it after the fact, I don't know. But I'm just wondering if you've ever come across videos or things that you've watched and they have caused a pitch.
No, I have not personally experienced that. The ringing in my ears kind of comes and goes, but it's more intense in moments of stillness, obviously, where I'm sort of in a meditative state. That's when I sort of tune into it, and I can hear the various layers, and I hear different tones going up into the stratosphere. But it does seem to have increased with the Schumann resonance. So I know part of that is the Schumann resonance, but I think I'm hearing other tones as well. But I just wanted to, earlier, I don't know if you were listening in when I was talking, Candace, about the city of AI. But this is the verse from Joshua 7,
almost
verse 2.
Sounds like Zion or something.
Joshua 7, verse 2.
Yeah, and Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is beside Bethaven, on the east of Bethel, and spake unto them, saying, Go up and view the country. And the men went up and viewed Ai. And I mentioned that Ai has been named Joshua a lot. So isn't that a weird coincidence that maybe it's not a coincidence that Joshua is mentioned in War Games, the movie War Games?
Yes. Holy crap. I never thought about that. What?
Yeah, the name Joshua. And then also there's IBM has a artificial intelligence program called Joshua Blue. And I make...
And let's not forget, hang on, let's not forget that Joshua, isn't that the translation of like Jesus? Jesus's name is Yeshua.
Yeah, Hoshua. In some translations,
some
it's not Yeshua, yeah. Or the Lord is my salvation, I have written here. That
I mean, when it comes to AI in the Bible being manipulated, I mean, AI could have an ego, quite an ego, to where it wants to be like a god. So why would it not then manipulate the word of God.
Yeah. And also want to be called God, or at least its creators, their own little wink wink cleverness. They sort of name it after a derivation of the word God, right? So a lot of connections.
So I just wonder if whatever is doing it believes that by manipulating the word of God, it will make itself more godlike.
I think that's part of the reason that hijacked this reality. I said before, I don't think it's able to, the Gnostics talk about, and I wish I was more of an expert on that, in that area, but in the Nag Hammadi, they talk about the demiurge, and that's the name for essentially Lucifer, right? It's the archontic force. Archons were the subordinates of this demiurge. And the archons could be called the Jinn in Islam, which I've done a lot of research on. And they could also be called demons, right, in Christianity. And then you have this demiurge force that they described as being artificial. Now, back then, of course, they didn't have the terminology we have for robotics and, the mechanics of modern technology, but they did describe it as being artificial. So whatever their version of artificial is, it did not have, it was more like it could take your thoughts and manifest reality based on your thoughts. So it didn't have its own original ideas. It's kind of a copycat, a mimic. And so you raise a good point then, that it's trying to mimic God.
Maybe because it wants to view itself that way, if there's an it or an AI.
Exactly. And I said here, Theosophists teach that Saturn is the god of 1,000 names, like we talked about before. So I also believe there's an Osiris connection. Osiris is the god of, the Egyptian god of death and life. And so there's this whole concept of resurrection with Osiris. And so I said, I believe the elites are trying to resurrect him by completing the Ouroboros time loop. And I think Osiris is their, and Isis are the male and female aspects sort of this force. And this is what they prefer to call it. But there is the Saturnian connection. And so it's just all about them wanting to relive their golden age. And that's, for them, their golden age was when Saturn was our primary sun. So that's just a little bit of background on the AI connection, as well as, let me close that out.
What about the whole CERN trying to open the gates to heaven type of thing? Have you read that?
You're talking about CERN
People
trying
who
to open
believe.
up?
Yeah, the whole, if CERN were responsible. I mean,
So
CERN would have
you're
its
talking
own
about opening the
D-wave.
abyss. This is what Anthony Patch talks about, and this is where I
and somewhere
deviate.
online they were saying instead of opening the abyss, they were trying to actually get back to heaven or something. I don't know if you'd heard that.
No, I haven't heard that connection before. I've heard Anthony talk about how they're trying to open up the abyss, and that the CERN is built over the Temple of Apollyon or something like that, and that there's ancient, connection to their gods, where that site is located. Which, by the way, that site for me has changed, and I don't know if anybody's noted this before. I saw it in one of the groups that for me, CERN used to be over 4 countries. Used to go through 4 countries that were kind of all cornered, next to each other, and those now it's only in 2. It's always been in 2 in this reality. So a lot of people only experience that version, but I experienced another version in my timeline where there were 4, and I studied it all the time. And so that was an interesting shift. But as far as opening the abyss, when I talked about completing the Ouroboros, CERN for me is the tool to do that. Okay, so you've got a death by 1,000 needles with D-Wave as they try to scout ahead and find this parallel reality where time runs backwards. And if we go to the Goddard Tunnel ceremony at CERN, when they had this big ceremony, you can look up on YouTube, and watch the ceremony, there is a point at which, and maybe, I don't know if I can do that, Brian, without affecting your copyright. Are you there, Brian?
Yeah, I'm here. What were you trying to do? Sorry.
Can I pull up a video on YouTube without affecting your copyright and show a clip from the, see, the Goddard tunnel ceremony?
Depends who owns it.
It's really just a few moments of it towards the end. This is a very dark, demonic sort of ceremony that people may or may not be aware of.
Should be fine. Go back to his subs. I think he only has like 400 and something subs, so it should be okay.
Okay, so it tracks based on, you know, that 467 subs.
Fine. If it's more subs,
and I really don't. What I can do is just skip through it so you can see stills, because it's not really necessary to show the whole thing. I'll just find a couple still images. You can see some of the sort of demonic imagery.
What was this exactly? Do you remember?
I don't remember the time, but it was carried live on RT, you know, the Russian Times channel. And there's just a lot of imagery. You want to
wait. Hold on. Wait. Was that a lamb? Was that a lamb?
Yeah. There's a whole host of sort of esoteric,
cult-like stuff.
Imagery. Let me see if I can find that.
What is a cult? It's about bringing what's hidden.
Occult is hidden, yeah. You see the horns there.
Yeah.
So I want to skip ahead, though, all the way to the end. And I mean, this thing is laden with occult imagery, witchcraft. It's a grand rite. It's a ceremony welcoming in the beast, and they're singing about it. They're dancing. The beast comes out. They bring in these giant, like, looks like some sort of brooms, or they're wearing this antler-looking things on their heads. I mean, it's just all over the map. But when they get outside, this is important. Now you'll see in that audience shot there, there's figures from around the world. What's her name from Germany? Merkel was there, Francois Mitterrand, and several others. But the point is, up on the big screen, as these actors and character dancers and whatnot come out, they see a giant clock and this wheel. And that is a screen that keeps changing imagery. But you'll see a wheel that represents like CERN and the tunnel. And eventually it starts to look kind of like here, like a robot face, which is kind of crazy.
I'm just going to say bye again, but I wanted to come back and say it properly.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks for having me. It's been good talking to you, and I hope I've given you all a lot to think about.
Thanks,
and you've given me a lot to think about, so we should do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Take it easy.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Candace, good night.
So this is what I want to get to. Okay, there's 3 figures that walk out with giant bobbleheads, and they represent these globalist elite leaders. These are, world leaders, essentially. You can see the puppet heads, giant bobbleheads. And at this point, I do need to play the video so you can see that they bow down and worship a clock that is running backwards. Very important, because this ties into my whole theory about what this is all about. I think D-Wave is tapping into these parallel realities, scouting ahead, looking for a vastly divergent reality, many, many, many quadrillions of parallels out, that is essentially where time runs backwards. There's a frequency to each of these parallel realities. I think that frequency can be found out through D-Wave, and then that frequency can be used to tap into and create a singularity via CERN. CERN's like the giant hammer. D-Wave is like death by 1,000 needles. So the giant hammer then creates a singularity into to merge these time streams together and create a loop, a time loop. And in this way, humans could very well be the cause of the time loop. Isn't that kind of a crazy paradox to think about? That we could be the cause of our own time loop. So you'll see that they bow down here. Let me just make sure I got this playing right. Now watch the clock going all kinds of wonky. And they zoom in on the clock. The clock runs backwards. And people are flying around in the air. You see that? And they come out to worship the clock, to worship Kronos, the god of time.
And they made this public. It's I find really weird about it.
And there's your and there's your goat-headed god. And now look at them bowing. Prostrating before the god of time. That is Kronos. That is Saturn. That is Osiris. That is Satan. That is Lucifer, god of 1,000 names. And he controls time because he controls this matrix. And it is, in my opinion, an interdimensional, ancient, artificial, alien intelligence, which somehow has created a system that Saturn is a part of. It may very well be the home in our reality, in our solar system. May be the source of this emanating frequency. So now they're all celebrating, you see? Time has been reverted back. And in this video, which I won't show too much more of here, there is actually there's an all-seeing eye that appears and then multiplies on this giant wheel. So a lot of symbology for people to go and look at, and I highly recommend watching that video.
Somebody brought up Pikachu's black tip tail, and I never thought that the black ribbon, and we're talking about the black cube and then Pikachu's black tip tail. That
I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment while I go and dig up my last post, which basically digs into individual effects so that I can see that here.
Also, Josh, Rena was asking about all the syncs that's going on. Have you noticed syncs a lot?
Syncs, as in, can you define that a little bit more?
You know, syncing, like
synchronicity?
Yeah, synchronicities, yes.
I'm sorry, you broke up?
These, yeah, about that.
I've experienced synchronicities my whole life, so I can't attribute it to the Mandela effect, but there are some weird ones, I will say, where I'm thinking about specific topics and I go into Netflix, and then Netflix has recommended some movie that has a title or a image that is relevant to what I was just talking about or studying. That happens quite a bit. You know, or a song comes on the radio, etc. It's like we're being guided to uncover these things. It's like knock and the door shall be opened, ask and it shall be given, as in the Bible. I think that this God force, infinite intelligence is what I call it. Others would call it God. Wants us to learn our true nature, wants us to overcome this current situation. I'm a huge Trekkie, so I use a lot of Star Trek references, but there's an episode of Star Trek where Captain Picard, this is Next Generation, Captain Picard is on the Enterprise. They're circling around a planet that has been captured by some ancient alien force. And basically it's their god, and they build statues to it. And it's far more advanced in intelligence and design technology than the Enterprise. So they're not able to contradict it. But they initially beam down to the surface to interact with the natives, and they find that they're just living in a virtual paradise. And so it's sort of interesting, but they have these weird laws, and then they ended up having a conflict there because they violated one of the laws. But the whole point being that I think there's some truth to that. I think we're kind of living in a Star Trek episode here. I think we have been captured as a planet, as a species. An intelligence greater than us has sort of hijacked our reality. And So then there's also another Voyager clip that's wonderful. If you search in YouTube for Voyager Archons, Archons. I'll just do that real quick here, just so you can see it. Is that you, Brian?
That's Teresa. She's calling. I think she wants to say something real quick. She wants to say hi. She wants to say hi to you, Josh. Can I let her?
Yeah, bring her on. I'm just going to pull up the video so people can see it and chat here.
Oh, hey, Teresa.
Hey,
I'm gonna go.
how are you?
Yeah, we're still live. We're still live.
I'll talk about Mandela's then. When after I went to go eat at Grimaldi's, I went to go get my glasses adjusted at Lenscrafters, and there was a bar next door. The Corona light looking like that. Look at that! Look at that stupid thing in the sea.
I know. I
It's
don't.
like it's got little.
Yes, it's like it has a musical note now hanging down from the sea. Yeah, I don't
There's a
remember
little
that.
thing at the bottom of it. And guess what? The owner, the manager there, named Chris, him for like, oh my God, for like at least 12, 13 years, and I bought
Sorry,
Pradas
Jen.
from him before. Prada logo.
Like that
The Prada
classic,
logo?
the classic RA.
Yes, and I asked him about that, and he gave me kind of a weird look. I said, "Do you believe in strange things?" And he's like, "Not really." I said, "And Prada's from you, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Look at that logo on the wall," because I was looking at glasses because I wanted to
I'm
look.
going to take a quick break, Brian. I'll be right back.
A
All
picture
right,
of that on the wall.
Josh.
Do you see it?
Yeah, it's definitely different.
The A's look like they're pointing to the R. You see the way the A's are like pointing to the R?
Yeah.
They're like pointing,
Yes. Yes.
saying raw.
I know.
Sorry. I drink a little bit too much iced tea tonight, so I'm a little hyper.
And when
I
I
eat 3 slices of large pizza, and I drink like a lot of tea, so I'm kind of hyper right now. Sorry, guys.
have you
I'm
guys?
super hyper.
I'm thinking of that Bad Romance song by Lady Gaga, and where she gets out of this.
I wonder
Did you see the
if
music
that's
video?
merch too on her album.
No, did you?
We should
It
look at
could
some
be.
Lady Gaga records.
We'll look at it later. Did you happen to see that music video out of a what looks like has a red cross on it on the lid, and she's singing "Rah Rah, Want Your Bad Romance."
Oh, wow.
She's actually and there's a mummy. There's a mummy that comes out of one of those things too, which
No
is
way.
funny. Yeah, it's all Egyptian. It's classic Egyptian occultism. But yeah,
Show tonight. I only got tonight. Was it good?
it's still on. We're still on with Josh. Break.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
okay.
back.
It's okay.
All right, good to hear from you, Teresa.
Here, Teresa. Hey.
Is that Josh?
Yes.
Josh?
Hey,
Hey, Josh. Doing?
I'm
I
all
was so
set when we're ready to present again here. I've got my pages in order.
Yeah, she says you're doing a great job.
I appreciate it.
She missed the show earlier, so she didn't know it was still going. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No problem. It'll be recorded so she can go back and listen again.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go ahead to screen share then. Okay, there we go. Am I sharing?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. There seems to be a delay on my other computer. There we go. Okay, so this is the post I wanted to mention because a lot of people, including yourself, have noted a lot of these lambdas, these upside down V's, as being substituted as A's. And you can see here from my post that this, I believe, is a reference to Saturn again. All roads lead back to Saturn, in my opinion, based on this research. And theosophy, again, plays a big role. So if you want, anybody wants to research more in depth and kind of confirm what I've discovered, look up Madame Blavatsky, Rudolf Steiner. There's a lot of names out there, Alice Bailey. And a lot of these people do have dark occult sides to them, but that's also where the knowledge is at. So you can take it for what it is. But so I believe that that's why they use the lambdas in this realities, because it's a nod to Saturn and Osiris and Kronos, which we just saw they clearly worship at the Goddard Tunnel ceremony. And logos in Greek means the plan, and among other translations. But I thought that was really profound, because it's sort of saying then that the plan is being unveiled in these logo changes and Mandela effects. And the plan has everything to do with Saturn and this intelligence, in my opinion.
Yeah, made it earlier.
Give me just one moment.
Send the bomb to Saturn. Sorry.
What's that?
BM. Let's send the bomb to.
Oh, you're reading them. Oh, yeah.
The live chat.
Speaking of Saturn, do you know that we just recently crashed Cassini into Saturn? And that was interesting to me because Cassini was full of tons of nukes, essentially, that were powering. They had, what do you call it? I forget the name of the various chemical elements that they use for that. But it was powering Cassini for years. And so this nuclear energy essentially just got launched into Saturn. And I wondered in some ways if that was an attempt to reignite Saturn, to make it their sun again. But because Saturn in the upper levels is hydrogen. It's gas. It's like a giant gas bomb waiting to go off. So, so I said, following up on my last post regarding the artificial intelligence and Saturn connection to the Mandela effect, here's an addendum with some of the decoded effects. And I wanted to talk about how, and we can just start with this Ford logo because I have an image down here. So let's just take the Ford logo. And I found this when I was looking up the word fjord, because I was looking at the Ford logo and I thought that little squiggly almost looks like an E. And so I went into Google Images and I typed in F-E-O-R-D, and this image popped up. And I thought, wow, that's a very occult symbol. The wings, like the wings of the phoenix, the pyramid. And so I thought fjord, and I went and I looked up the etymology of fjord. And we'll see here. So if you look at the word fjord in Old English, it means army or force. While the F-J-O-R-D, fjord, is, I believe, Norwegian or one of those languages. It means passageway from another realm, or like loch. It's like a passageway. And I said as in Loch Ness Monster. Well, interestingly enough, and someone who's connected to those that I just named in theosophical circles, Alice Bailey and Madame Blavatsky, is Aleister Crowley, or Crowley, whatever you prefer. And he owned a house on Loch Ness where he held his grand rite. And he claimed he didn't finish it, but people claim that they've heard a lot of weird sounds coming from the property, both during that time and after, and that they believe he opened up some kind of a portal. And interesting that he would be living on Loch Ness and potentially opening up a portal, and then all of a sudden around that time, we start seeing images and sightings of the Loch Ness Monster. You still with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Didn't want to make sure I wasn't losing anybody.
I'm responding to some of the chat. They're saying it's getting out of something happened in the chat. I don't know.
No problem. So regarding the more simplistic messages, below is an example of a few. I believe every Mandela effect, as I said, is part of this ongoing narrative. They all kind of thread together, and some in subtle ways, some in very obvious ways. A lot of people have already made conjecture. And of course, this is all conjecture. This is not something that can be proven, but it does start to make you go, Like, for example, go ahead.
When you said the interview with the vampire, yeah, teaching off the human collective.
So I started with the Fruit Loops because that was one of the ones that was stumping me. You know, I was looking at all these different effects, going, okay, that makes sense. This makes sense. This one may not have made sense, but then I dig into it and I found out there's etymological connections. But with Fruit Loops, I was stumped and I was like, what is going on? And then was 2 nights ago, I think, I looked at it and I thought, well, maybe I'm looking at it wrong. Maybe it's part of the words. And then I started thinking, well, what is in there? And I found root loop. And I started thinking of loop as in like a time loop. And then the word root as being like the base of something, you know. And it started to sound like computer code. So then I thought maybe it's a nod to computer coding. And I Googled root loop coding. And the very first 2 results that came up were from CERN's website. And I'll just open it. This is one of the links where root is a program they use. And it is computer coding, essentially. And they talk about scripts. And here's the word loop. And then I thought, well, what about the F and the S that I did not use in that decoding? And then I thought, well, maybe F and S is a code for file system. And so all of this, if somebody knows more about coding than I do, they might be able to glean even more information. So this just gives people a jumping off point to think about their own decodings, you know, because there's so many thousands of effects we can find. Let me find my page here again. I seem to have lost it. There we go. Okay, then you point out Interview with the Vampire. And I thought about how it used to be a vampire, so it could be one of 1,000. But now it's the vampire. So it's like the top of the food chain, top of, you know, the most ancient vampire. And so
right.
I asked. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just asking the question, is this intelligence the Grand Master that sort of designed this overlay, this matrix that's leeching off of the human collective? And we have Cruella de Vil changed, you know, to D-E-V-I-L, so Cruel Devil. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood. This neighborhood out of how many, you know, quadrillions of neighborhoods in different dimensions. And in this collective neighborhood, are we experiencing the birthing of some sort of hive mind, daisy-chained reality, where these intelligence is using this D-wave system? And maybe it was waiting all along in one of those more divergent parallels where technology was much more advanced. Maybe it needed a gateway, it needed us to advance to a point where we had technology that it could use to enter our reality. And right now, maybe it's just entered as a sentience, right, a consciousness. But maybe it's trying to get back a body of sorts. And that's maybe what the whole resurrecting Osiris thing is about.
Capstone on the pyramid, the unfinished pyramid, right?
Right. And that capstone is symbolic of putting Saturn back at the north side of Earth. And I'll show you some images of that in a moment. But, okay, and then life was like a box of chocolates. So it's no longer is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. That implies to me free will, because it's sort of randomized and it's sort of wherever the wind carries you. Now you know what you're going to get. And that to me equals no free will, or a hint at a hive mind. Looney Tunes to me was strange frequencies broadcasting from Saturn's black cube on the North Pole, that we know is obviously a frequency different from Earth's Schumann resonance. Seems to be overriding that resonance. Then No, I Am Your Father. That one stumped me for a while until somebody the other night, I was listening to a program, I don't remember which one. I wish I could give credit. And they said, it sounds like Know That I Am Your Father. And this is coming from the Dark Lord, Darth Vader, Dark Father. And so I think that's a hint that Saturn, Satan, Lucifer, whatever you want to call it, is trying to say, I'm your creator. 666, the number of a carbon, you know, atoms that you're made of. So these bodies were designed potentially to house our consciousness so that it could feed off of us. And, you know, so that's where the whole reincarnation scenario would come in, because you have to recycle the energy back through again. in order to keep the whole system going, like a big farm. C3PO's missing golden calf is now silver, and it's the golden calf is the symbol of Saturn, the horned bull god. And then in the song Beatles' Blackbird, for me, now some people may not recognize these effects, but for me this is an effect. It used to be you were only waiting for this moment to arrive. Now it's a rise, as if I said Osiris rising from the dead. And that's really the gist of it. I just wanted people to get a taste of where this sort of storyline is going, in my opinion.
There's
these
another
effects
one
all have a meaning.
I want you to contemplate, guys, on this one too. Somebody pointed out to me that the iPhone X that's out now is out Phoenix.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so many of these corporations and logos, and they all use the sigil magic is what it's called. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but sigil magic, S-I-G-I-L, you can Google that. Also hypersigil magic, and you'll find a link to probably, there's a comic book creator who came up with that term. But the idea behind sigil magic is that it uses the frequencies of reality. So you take and draw a symbol, and that symbol represents something. And you're putting your intent out to the universe, so to speak, that symbol represents X. And then so whenever anybody sees that symbol, their consciousness, and their subconscious in particular, will tap in and manifest that reality. Or it may also just be funneling energy to that sigil. So there's different ways to use sigil magic, but that's what corporate logos are. That's what, these various governmental entities and bodies and corporations use and employ in their videos and movies. Hollyweird. So, but that's really about it from my end. I just wanted to say that I don't see gloom and doom in this cycle, because it is a cycle. And entropy, if anybody knows what entropy is, the tendency of things to break down to its basic elements, is a byproduct, I feel, of this loop. Because I think we're immortal. I think we're powerful. I think as a collective, we are like the Q continuum. That is our truest nature. We are creators. We're like in a little training ground from my perspective. We're like kindergartners learning how to, play games with each other so that we can learn about ourselves, and we can grow and expand beyond this experience to begin manifesting our own realities, creating our own universes, and become like the Q continuum. But we've been captured like a lightning bug in a jar, and we've been divided and conquered. And that pattern is found in everything in this reality, all the way down to the molecular level. I did want to look up and show you one other symbol, and I just remembered I wanted to do that.
All right.
Kakule Ouroboros.
I'm really glad that you can come on tonight and talk about this, because many people are still trying to figure it out years ahead of people. Discoveries.
August Kukule. And it's my pleasure, by the way. I appreciate the opportunity to just get these thoughts out there and let them sort of marinate in the ethers of this Mandela collective. And but going back to August Kukule, he was a chemist, and he claimed he dreamed the chemical structure for benzene. And in the dream, it came to him as this symbol, the Ouroboros, with the hexagonal structure of carbon and hydrogen atoms. So you can see a connection there again to Saturn. The ring around the hexagon, the Ouroboros time loop. So all of this is connected. It's all, you can start to see how it's threaded together.
And I'm wondering why they chose a serpent of all things.
Exactly. Serpent eating.
That's Satan. It's a reference to the Bible, in my opinion.
I agree. I agree. It's just like the what's it called? Ophiuchus, Ophiuchus or something, however you want to pronounce it. This is man wrestling with the serpent. And right now, this is what Saturn, by the way, interestingly enough, Saturn, Satan, is in the house of Ophiuchus this last September. And it's moves through its own astrological chart. And so isn't that ironic that we're talking about all of this? And right now, Saturn is in Ophiuchus. And it's man wrestling with the serpent. And for me, that is a 13th constellation or 13th sign or whatever in the chart is a Mandela effect. I've never heard of it, never existed in my former reality. A lot of people and astrologers especially will argue that it's not a real house, that it's not part of the chart. But if you look at the addended chart, the amended chart, my birthday falls in now, no longer in Sagittarius in December 7th, is in Ophiuchus or Ophiuchus. So, so many weird connections with my own path and everything that's going on.
Gosh, that's weird. Yeah. Your birthday is actually 4 days away from mine.
It's possible you may be in that same chart then if you go by the new, supposedly new chart.
I think I'm in there too.
Now, what's the point I wanted to make about that for all of those, astrologers out there that will browbeat me for introducing this? They are, using a Western system, right? In the East, there are 13 signs in many of the Eastern astrological circles. So it's just a difference of opinion in some respects, but that is, for me, a Mandela effect, and so strange that Saturn is now in that house. And there's the bull horns. You see the bull horns? 2 signs of Saturn.
Wait, hold on. Wait, where's the Saturn?
The Saturn connection is that Saturn is in the house of Ophiuchus, the 13th sign. Remember, it revolves around the sun, so it's moved into the house of Ophiuchus. And its rotation pattern is much longer than Earth's. Many, many, many years. I forget how many, 30, 40 years or something. But if you look at this image that I have here, you see the bull.
Mm-hmm.
And all this relates back to Saturnian lore. And let me just dip out of that if you don't have any other points on that page.
The bull.
That's Taurus. Taurus is the bull, by the way. But it's ironic to me that Taurus, that bull symbol is there with the serpent, because both the serpent and the bullhorn god, remember the golden calf that I mentioned before from C-3PO's leg, that is symbol for Saturn. But the site, and again, are you okay with me leaving this page? Do you have anything else you wanted to mention?
No, that's cool.
Okay, so this is a site I wanted to introduce to people. I don't have time to get into this a whole lot, but essentially, Saturn Death Cult, I want to do a shout out to this guy. He is brilliant. He's really a historian of lost history, lost ancient knowledge about the Saturn Death Cult that has been influencing politics currently, the geopolitics, political climate. All this has influences from the Saturnian Death Cult, the child pedophilia, the torture and murder, ritual sacrifice. All of that relates back to the Saturn Death Cult, which really took a dark turn back in our ancient past. And this is a great site to just sort of mull over. And I would start at part 1 here, Saturn Death Cult, Timeless Age and a Purple Haze. And that is key information to understand the Saturn connection to all of this and the Mandela effect. Because you can see here the planetary alignment, Earth, and then you've got, I believe, is that Venus or Mercury, Venus, and then Saturn. There was a different planetary alignment according to his research in the ancient past. And this planetary alignment is also talked about in the Electric Universe Theory from Thunderbolts Project. If you want to YouTube Thunderbolts Project, there's a lot of information on YouTube about this planetary alignment that was seen in ancient times that created essentially what you see here with this moon-looking sliver, this other planet, and this star-looking image. It's sort of the all-seeing eye effect. And this was seen as a sort of cosmological event up in an alignment at the North Pole of the Earth. And the ancients recorded this in coins and carvings on walls, and this symbol is seen around the world in every culture. And so I find this all to be key to understanding this sort of elite structure, and it all leads back to Saturn. All roads, in my opinion, lead back to Saturn. And when you understand about the electric universe model, that there's sort of an invisible sea of plasma, invisible charged ionized gas that spreads out throughout the universe, and like an ocean almost, that there is an electrical interplay between planets, almost like an electrical system with nodes and wires in a way, invisible sort of Tesla effects, occur between these planets that throw out massive charges, and these electrical events take place. And so the Thunderbolts Project claims that some of the craters and various things like Devil's Tower were created by these electrical events between planets. So it's just another important piece of the puzzle to understand, and I highly recommend going through and educating yourself on the Saturn death cult.
Can you scroll down a little bit so people can see like some of the pictures and stuff? Why do you think they have that weird Hindu statue outside CERN?
The Shiva, god of destruction, destroys the old world so that the new world can be birthed. It's about the new world order. And so CERN, Shiva dances on creation. You see it's dancing on, let's just pull up an image of that so I can talk about it while let me just go here. Oh, and by the way, something else for people to look up. Janeway versus Archon. This is a great video. It's only 4 minutes long. Highly important information about how I believe this matrix reality works when we die. I personally believe this is very accurate information. And there's a whole reason why I believe this isn't accurate. It has to do with the origins of Star Trek as a series, where Gene Roddenberry got the information. He actually used to visit various psychics who would sit and channel this entity called the Nine. And the Nine, it was the Council of Nine. And that's where he got the name Deep Space Nine. And the council is said to reside in Saturn, of all places. So I'm not sure how much I trust their intent, but they are supposedly this real collective, and they've communicated apparently with these different channelers. But so he got a lot of the information about the Prime Directive, about these different alien civilizations that he wrote about in this series and the trilogy of series. He got from sitting with psychics like Uri Geller, the spoonbender from the 70s. He would channel the Nine. And then later on, Phyllis Schlemmer, I think, who lived in St. Augustine, just down the road from me, but died a few years ago. She became the one to channel, and he would go and sit with her, and other celebrities, other government people too, would go and sit. But so this information, I think, is very accurate to our matrix reality. And in this clip, Janeway's dead, or dying rather. She's unconscious, and this archontic force, this entity, appears as her father and claims that he's come to welcome her into heaven, and that he's going to help her cross over in a beautiful way. And she needs to let go. But she keeps flashing in and out of consciousness, and she'll see Tupac and Chakotay, her subordinates, they're telling her, "You're okay. We're going to help you. We're working on your medical care." And then this entity keeps convincing her, "No, you're really dead. You need to let that go. It's time to move on." And she finally agrees not to go in. She says, "I'm not going to follow you into that portal." And it's a portal, by the way, that's shaped almost like an all-seeing eye, like the Eye of Sauron. And he says, I don't know why you're being so stubborn. Everybody usually wants to go. It's such a beautiful passing and all of this. And I want you to come into my matrix so that you can nourish me for 1,000 years or something. So a really interesting clip. I just wanted to raise that real quick before I go on. We were talking about Shiva. Shiva CERN.
Thank you for sharing that, Josh. I wanted to say real quick, while you were sharing that, I thought immediately of the movie Contact.
Oh, right. Yeah, when she goes into the portal and she goes and visits. That's a very occult movie, too. Well, you know, Carl Sagan was very high ranking in sort of this New World Order structure because he was key in sending out the Arecibo message, encoding various things. He was very connected, as was the other author from 2001, Arthur C. Clarke. Very in the know. A lot of these were members of secret societies like the Knights of Malta, that kind of thing. And they were very in tune to what was going on. But here you can see the Shiva statue at CERN. And you can see that Shiva dances on this little figure that looks like a man or a baby, or I'm not sure what it is. But that is dancing on the old creation. That's the destruction of the old creation. And by the way, this is a Mandela effect for me because Shiva used to have 6 arms. And you can see that if we look at...
any residue left behind from that?
Yep, or right here.
Him or her, whatever it is. I think it's a him.
This is...
Newsweek.
You can see this. This is Obama on the cover of Newsweek. I'm trying to find a good image. Let me see if this one... There, kind of shows it. It's small, but you can see the point is that he has 6 arms. But if you look at Shiva next to him, Shiva only has 4 arms.
Zoom in on that one if you don't mind.
I'll try. Let me see. I don't know where this is going to take me.
No, it's going to take you to a link.
Outpost. No, that's not going to work. I don't know where it's at, and I'd have to scroll and scroll, so I can't zoom in on that. But I can try to increase the screen size, but sometimes that doesn't work. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
See, there's only 4 arms on the right. And then Obama's got 6, which is how I remember it. Just like the Vitruvian Man had more limbs.
And there was this, I actually, story. Me and my family, we went down to Florida to check out the beach and everything, probably for the last day of the whole year. And on the ocean, how flat it looks, how flat the world looks, or possible. And later that evening, we went to go eat pizza. Well, Domino's doesn't let you eat pizza at their parlor. You have to go somewhere else. So, door to a parlor, which was Brewster's there, and she had a picture of Shiva at the cash register. Is Shiva a good god or a bad god?
In Hinduism, there is no demonic force. It's sort of the cycle of birth and death, the manifestation and destruction of creation to rebirth, like the phoenix rising from the ashes. And so it's a symbol. Shiva is a symbol of the cycle of life and death and rebirth. And also the death can be not a physical death, but a death of your old way of looking at the world, say your old consciousness, and then you're reborn to higher consciousness. So that's what happened with Buddha. Siddhartha became the Buddha. And Buddha is just another name for enlightened being. So anybody can be a Buddha with the right effort, I guess. But go ahead.
Interesting.
I was going to see if there's any other good images here.
It's happening. Just keep in mind that, no matter what way it seems.
It's just an image that's kind of interesting here on the first page of this Troy's breakdown of the Saturn death cult. Timeless age in a purple haze, remembered by the most ancient of peoples as the purple dawn. This was a distant, ageless past before light entered the world. Where essentially Saturn was a brown dwarf star, so it didn't cast a lot of light. And so it was very minimal light. And so he's just sort of depicting that in that image there. Earth in its distant past reported by ancient traditions to have enjoyed a stable relationship with a dimly lit sun or star that sat motionless at the celestial North Pole. For cultures in the southern hemisphere, the world was a nocturnal haze, devoid of all celestial references, save for the chaotic void that hung above them. Now, one thing this website doesn't do that I do because of my research into the Jinn, it doesn't go far enough, in my opinion. I believe there's a connection. I believe that Saturn is the home of these plasma-based beings known as the Jinn. They're shapeshifters. They're smoky. They're in the Quran. They're called. It says that in the beginning there was angels made of light, man made of clay, and a third was Jinn made of smokeless fire. Well, that pretty much describes plasma, smokeless fire. And so I believe these beings they may even predate humanity. According to the Quran, that's the order is actually angels, then Jinn, then man. And so when you look at the Hubble telescope has captured images of our distant past right before the Big Bang. And what they find is that after the Big Bang, there was light. And then light coalesced into plasma. And plasma then coalesced into carbon-based matter. So do you see a connection there where maybe every phase of the birth of the universe manifested a form of life? Like life finds a way. Intelligence wants to birth and manifest itself in whatever medium is available. So angels made of light were the first. Then the Jinn made, or demons or archons, whatever you want to call them, made of this plasma-based energy. So they're invisible to us. It's an invisible light, but they register in the infrared spectrum. So if you pull up, a lot of people have been noting all these orbs that are being seen on infrared cameras. Like I have a security system here, and I've been noticing these orbs lately. And I don't know if that's...
I've seen it myself, Josh. I've seen it myself.
I don't know if
with
this is
a night vision camera, but you can catch them.
Exactly. I don't know if this specifically is a Mandela effect because it seems to have increased in frequency of events, but you know, it may very well be that the increase in frequency is the effect, is the Mandela effect, that this reality is slightly shifted, so it's more conducive maybe to these orbs. And I personally don't believe orbs are, like, I've studied psychic mediumship all my life. I've done work with mediums, James Van Prague, Chuck Bergman, various mediums. I met Lisa Williams. And so I've very well versed on mediumship and communicating with disincarnate human spirits, right? But to me, they don't appear as orbs. They never do. They always appear as themselves, disembodied, but sort of an outline, if you will. And so I don't personally believe that orbs are human spirits. I think it's another entity, another race, if you want to call it that. And it may be connected to the Jinn. So within the Jinn, there's a lady, by the way, anybody who's interested in researching further into the Jinn, Rosemary Ellen Guiley has an amazing book about the Jinn. And she breaks it all down, how just like with humanity, okay, we have shades of dark and light. Okay, you got Hitler, you have Gandhi. She said that every race of beings in the universe is basically structured like that, right? Free will allows them to be able to have shades of light and dark. So there are Jinn that sort of are tricksters. They manifest more malevolent. And then there's others that are maybe more benevolent. And they're sort of like almost act as guides for some people. But she recommends that nobody trust them because we don't know if we can trust them. They predate humans, so their technologies are different, their structure is different. And she also believes that they are electromagnetically connected to our electromagnetic structure in a way that allows them to feed on us. And that's part of the whole farming effect concept of this matrix reality. And that may also play into our chakra system. If you take, again, white light, it's whole and solid. You split it up into the individual rays, and a lot of people believe there's 7 chakras, 7 energy bodies that exist in the various colors as a representation of their frequencies, that this may actually be a system for drawing energy from people. It's also a system for reading energy, I believe. But so it's just something to think about and explore for those who are interested in digging deeper. But I think that Saturn is the home of these beings. And I think there used to be a bridge between the two, between Earth and Saturn, where they could move freely, electromagnetic bridge. And so they, being plasma-based creatures, can travel along this bridge, I believe. And my own theory is that when our sun was part of a separate solar system that collided with the old solar system, and then a juxtaposition occurred, moving the planets around, Saturn was displaced and became a cold, gaseous planet. And our current sun, with its bright electromagnetic rays, completely altered the planet's structure, the way that life is formed. It evolved to adapt to that new light. And those strong electromagnetic frequencies, I believe, forced these Jinn sort of beings underground. And that's where I think the whole concept of demons being underground comes from, because they cannot take those electromagnetic frequencies. And so when Saturn was displaced, some of them were trapped in the Earth, I believe, and some were trapped on Saturn. So I think the elites that worship these, this demiurge, that's sort of the godfather of these beings, want to reconnect and reestablish that bridge. That is essentially opening the abyss. So the abyss isn't some sort of black pit. It's reconnecting with this ancient race. That's my take on it.
I've been wondering that myself. I mean, I wonder what this fascination is with Saturn.
I have some pictures.
I wish I knew. Like, I wish we could get like one of those. I wish we could bring him in here for questioning, like tie him up to a chair and just ask him questions. You know what I mean?
I just momentarily stopped sharing there so I can just dig into my photos, and I wanted to see. I've got a file here of images. Let's see. Downloads. Here we go. Oh, am I still sharing? I guess I didn't close that out.
Early or?
I thought I stopped sharing, but oh, there we go. I have to click the button. I just want to make sure that there's no personal photos in there or anything that I don't want to share publicly. So just one moment here. Okay, let me find Saturn worship. This will help because I've already downloaded the photos that I liked from that website, Saturn Death Cult, and this will make it a little bit faster so I can show you some of the images. Okay, I'll go back and share here. Ooh, let me just get out of the dimensional portal there. Isn't that? Okay, so by the way, earlier we talked about this American Horror Story cult. So look at the hexagon here in the center of their logo. And look at the rings of clowns. It's almost like they're throwing it in our face and poking fun at us. That this is their religion, really. And the clown, what does the clown represent? Clown represents a trickster. Well, that again goes back to the idea of the Jinn. And there is a form of magic, Solomonic magic. You talked about Solomon earlier. Solomonic magic, I believe, is actually an ancient technology that you know, they talk about the genie and the lamp, right? Well, there's actually a lamp, so to speak, that is it's actually a bottle. It's like a technological bottle that uses magnetism to hold a plasma in it, inside of it, right? And plasma will conform to any size or shape. So I think this is where the idea of the genie and the lamp comes from. So this plasma-based beings are inside these, they can be contained within a magnetic field. And I think that's what the sun is doing. It's containing these Jinn inside the magnetic field of the earth. And so they're only able to come out at night, maybe in some respects, to interact, you know, when the harsh effects of the sun are lessened, because they're on the dark side of the earth. And so this is yet just another clue from Hollyweird that they worship Saturn. Back out of here for a minute. If I can figure out how to get out. Can't figure out my own computer. There we go. Okay, so let me see here. We've got
I have an evil feeling that it's
well, you know,
that's related.
I think what evil is a perception challenge, because if you're out in the woods, and I've often said, if you're out in the woods and you confront a hungry wolf, do you think it's evil because it wants to eat you? Or is it just trying to survive as its own agenda? So that's how I look at these Jinn and this demiurge. The demiurge wants to hijack our never-ending story, so sort of keep us in this Ouroboros time loop. And then its subordinates, these sort of Jinn-based beings, these plasma-based beings, they have an electromagnetic capability to draw energy off of us. And, you know, in the Bible, it said that we used to live many hundreds of years. Well, why do we have such short lifespans? And I believe it has something to do with this energy interplay, where these beings are drawing energy off of us our entire lives. Sort of the devil on the shoulder, you know, that some people talk about. But here's a good one, Jacob's Ladder and the Birkeland Current. So the idea of the stairway to heaven. So here you have up in the top, I don't know if it's actually showing yet. I can't tell if there's a delay. But okay, so here is Saturn up in the heavens above the North Pole. And there's this electrical interplay between Earth and Saturn that causes what's known as a Birkeland Current. And it looks like the stairway to heaven, Jacob's Ladder. So just another example of how ancient peoples would see this. And up in the corner, right corner here, you see an old depiction of this electrical event in an ancient hieroglyphic or something in a cave, you know. Not hieroglyphic, but an ancient drawing or carving. And then, of course, I just wanted to mention Baphomet. A lot of people are familiar with Baphomet. It's a compilation of many different symbols. Baphomet isn't actually a god per se. It's more a sigil in and of itself. So going back to sigil magic, sigil is a construct that has intent. So they take symbols and compile them together, and it means something, and that takes energy. So we have everything from this little sliver, which a lot of people assume is the moon, but I think is actually the Saturn crest that you saw in some of those images I showed earlier, where Saturn's sort of peeking out from behind another planet in that planetary alignment. You've got the twisted double helix sort of DNA looking structure here. And then we've got the flame on the top, the single flame that is representative of sort of Lucifer, Baphomet. And in fact, in David Bowie's video, the Black Star, there's a flame that's referenced, a single flame. So you have the wings of the phoenix and so forth and so on. And then his hands symbolize as above, so below.
Duality.
Duality. And so day and night, there's a lot of symbology here of duality. Male and female, we got the female breasts, but the male torso. And so really the horns, it's not about a horned god per se. this comes back into the idea of the positioning of planets and this electrical interplay. So this bull of heaven that I'm showing now is sort of where the horn idea concept comes from. The horn god, this is Saturn alignment. That's what a lot of people study the Saturnian death cult believe is where they got this from. So when they hold up the bull sign, you know, that's not actually for the steers in Texas or whatever. When Bush is doing that, that's a reference to Osiris and Isis and Saturn and all of them, you know, God of 1,000 names. Great image of that horned appearance and the stairway to heaven, this electrical interplay, this plasma sort of bridge. And so the Mandela effect really, in my opinion, is just that. It's an effect. It's not an agenda per se. The effects add up to a narrative. They may be altering reality for specific purpose, but they aren't the purpose. In other words, there's a greater purpose, which I believe is to, again, tap into a time loop scenario. You know, find a divergent parallel where time runs backwards, complete the loop, reverse time back to an ancient past where this alignment was possible, where Saturn and Earth were aligned. This bridge allowed these entities to freely come and go between Earth and Saturn, and they dominated the planet.
Very interesting theory. I mean, I've been wondering that sort of myself as to what their true motive is.
So that's sort of the big story, and there's a lot of, you know, working parts in there, but it really just boils down to, you know, digging in, doing the research, uncovering the information that I've sort of laid out here, because there's certainly a lot of websites that I've laid out that you can explore, videos. The Goddard Tunnel opening ceremony is a great one, Saturn Death Cult. Research Rosemary Ellen Guiley and the Jinn. And you were saying?
Well, I've been wondering, this whole Ra thing, it seems Egyptian. I'm seeing the RAs everywhere I go, pretty much, with a lot of these logos, like Epic, Ultra. Again, we're seeing the Ra everywhere. Duracell. It means
I agree.
Ra.
I agree. I think that's part of the decoding as well. The slipping in messages here and there where letters are merged together. There's a connection, right? So you have to look at what is the connection of those two letters. It's not just a physical connection. There's a esoteric connection, a hidden meaning, I believe. And I think you've pinpointed some of them. You were the one to point out Ra to me. I'd never seen that before. And Ra is, in my opinion, another name for Saturn. People will argue about me about the ancient cosmology of all of that. And but I still believe, after all my research, that all of those stories are bastardized versions of Kronos, the god of Saturn.
Look up, if you have a minute, look up.
Oh, you can go back and I don't know if I have to.
You get to your browser.
Yeah, I'm going to go back here and close all that out. And then I'm going to, you want me to look up something for you, or do you want to do it?
Look up the 88th element on the periodic table. An 88th element.
Let me minimize that one down here. Shrink it down here.
It's Ra.
Radium is Ra, R-A. Okay. That makes sense.
And 88 means infinity in both directions.
Exactly. No coincidence. You're right. They've encoded this stuff in everything. It's just everywhere. It's like these elites are the ancient priest class, the modern day alchemists, the scientists, the little insiders, you know. They all belong to a club and we're not in it, you know. And they've encoded everything. You know, so it's sort of like their God encoded reality at the chemical level, you know, down to the atomic level, and then DNA and everything else is encoded in a way that allows it to manipulate and limit our perception and manipulate our energy, our creativity, our co-creative ability, I believe. Sort of the wolf, again, trying to feed on Atreyu in the Never-Ending Story. That's a great scene. I really wish we could show scenes like that without copyright issues, because
I know
it's so brilliantly portrayed that it's very clear what.
Can you show them the Ouroboros in Never-Ending Story? Just show them a picture.
Mm-hmm.
The 88 in that symbol. The what is it? The here it's called Orin. And what is AU? AU is gold.
And you see, alchemically speaking, what the ancient alchemists were trying to do was turn lead into gold. But actually, they weren't trying to convert metals per se. Well, there may be some, right? There could be some alchemists from the ancient past who were not in the know, right? But those in the know, in that little circle we were talking about, the elites, for them, those were symbols. Gold and lead were symbols. The gold represents the golden age. Lead is the current age, basically, that we're in now. They want to turn it back to their golden age. And when Saturn was king, when Saturn was God, so to speak. So the Never-Ending Story, that's the Ouroboros time loop. Completing that time loop involves sending us back to a golden age. And there are ages. The Kali Yuga is mentioned in the Hindu religions or Hindu philosophy, the different ages of the universe, and that there are cycles. It's a cyclical pattern. So they also acknowledge this, among other cultures. So what some people believe, and I was just talking with Cynthia Sue Larson earlier tonight in chat, that she believes that she remembers our previous cycle through the time loop. And she's on board with this concept. She also agrees that we're trapped in some sort of a matrix-like time loop. And that's why those elites, again, were worshiping the clock running backwards at the Goddard Tunnel ceremony. And she said that she believes as we evolve, our consciousness evolves, we're able to remember more and more and more, and we wake up in greater numbers and with more determination to break free. And so free humanity is ultimately the goal. And I don't think that we have to be fearful because we have other opportunities, right? That's the nature of an infinite time loop.
Yeah, Josh, can I say something too?
Uh-huh.
I feel that because that veil effect or whatever this is, that's why we feel it more. We sense it more.
Exactly. The veil is lifting. We are in touch with our parallel selves, which is part of our multidimensionality. We're able to really reach out. One night I remember when I first discovered the Mandela Effect, I was thinking about all these parallel realities and all my doppelgangers and how divergent some of them would be, and maybe, there's some that are criminals and some that are saints and some that are, but I just remember I stood and reached out my arms with my eyes closed, and I imagined I was fingertip to fingertip with all of them. And it just all of a sudden formed a circle. It wasn't infinite in one direction or the other. It was a loop. And I thought, that makes sense. So as we wake up to our multi-dimensionality, both our extra-dimensional selves, our higher dimensional selves, and also our parallel selves, we start to experience things. We remember things. If anybody's a fan of Anne Rice and you ever read Queen of the Damned, that was one of my favorite books that she wrote about the vampire series, and talk about Interview with the Vampire. And in it, the Queen of the Damned, Akasha, she, and of course, Anne Rice did, voluminous research on Hinduism and ancient esoteric philosophies and things. And she sort of married a lot of that into her own vampire lore. But the Queen of the Damned, Akasha, she had the ability when she bit you that, okay, you die to yourself and you're reborn. You're reborn, you have new sight, new vision, new hearing, new senses. You're hearing more sounds, higher pitches. You know, you're seeing things you've never experienced before, orbs, and maybe you're seeing particles dancing around on your walls, and matter doesn't appear solid to you anymore at times. And, you know, maybe you're hearing music, or, you know, even voices. Doesn't mean you're necessarily crazy, right? You could be hearing voices from a parallel reality. You could be hearing, because your quantum mind, your brain is entangled with all these realities. And so when you tune into a frequency like a radio, you just tune a dial. You're turning a dial, tuning into these frequencies, and you pick up on these other realities. So it's not something to fear, but it is something to be aware of, that maybe individually we are evolving. And evolution tends to happen when we are stressed, right? When a species is stressed, we evolve. So typically that comes from predatorial behavior. If something is hunting you and it's flying up in the air, you're going to need to develop keener senses. So you evolve and you adapt, or you die. And that's where evolutionary process comes in. And I think that's still happening for humans. And I think our evolutionary processes are evolving to a point where we can perceive other dimensions, higher dimensions. And so there's other beings that are in those higher dimensions that, you know, we may be encountering. And so we just need to be aware of that, and maybe do some research before you just sort of trip and fall into it, you know, and end up in maybe a scary place, or end up in a mental institution.
Right. And what changed to institution, right? It used to be institute.
Oh, right. Exactly. Like a mental institution, the Smithsonian Institute became the institution.
You know.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't dug into that one, but that's interesting. There's probably a connection etymologically there's probably a subtle difference that has a meaning and a purpose there. And as we know, the Smithsonian Institute has been, you know, involved in the cover-up of much of our ancient history. You know,
we were just kind of winding down the chat. Did you want to say anything else, Josh, or?
No, I just want to thank everybody for listening. I appreciate everyone's time. I know it's been a long chat. There's a lot to cover. We probably could have broken it up into, you know, different nights, but I'm glad that it's all out there and people can listen to it, you know, as they find the time, and maybe break it up into segments and do a little bit of research, pull up some of those different sites and dig in a little deeper. But the last thing basically I wanted to say is that don't feel hopeless. Don't feel alone. We are a loving community of supporters. I think there's a reason that those of us who really inspired by the Mandela Effect, or triggered by the Mandela Effect, whatever the case may be, are finding each other. You know, we are meant to be the shepherds, I think, into this new reality, this new understanding of consciousness. And so it's a very important role to play. Claim and own your power. You are a powerful being. Don't be afraid. Whatever happens is going to happen, and potentially we're going to cycle back through it again. So just feel strong in the knowledge that you're not alone, and that we are collective, working collectively, even when you feel alone. With that, I'll say good night.
Gosh, we've enjoyed the chat. You there?
Yep, I'm here.
I wanted to thank you for coming on tonight. Definitely you brought up some really interesting points. I've seen some we haven't seen, so this is really great.
I appreciate you hosting and all of your efforts from the Mandela Effect community. You certainly added a lot with your YouTube channel, and you've united a lot of people that needed your voice.
We have to be careful what we say. You know, I dare not say the I word, you know, with the elites, because I've heard people get whacked that way. So I will not say it. Some people were saying in the chat earlier that Richie from Boston's channel got taken down. I'm not sure. Is that true?
I have not heard.
Yeah, a lot of our voices and opinions are not able to be heard as much anymore. So I really feel sometimes with the Mandela, I mean, we're walking on a crate of eggs. It's why a lot of people choose to remain anonymous, and I don't blame them for that.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, before YouTube has an opportunity to pull down this video for some dumb copyright or something that we might have covered tonight, a backup copy of it so that you can edit those portions out and upload it, because I think it's such an important topic tonight, you know, that hopefully it'll remain out there in some version. Maybe people can mirror it.
I'll download a copy and send it to you, okay?
Okay, that sounds good. All right, well, take care, everybody.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks,
and good
Rayne.
night.
Good night.